Look at this old thing. Where did you even find this, ma'am? Please, just leave me alone. Oh, that's not nice, Stacy. It's true, though. Don't be such a prude. You knew I'd never say anything. I always protect you. Oh, please. She brought this on herself. I thought it was you. My God, it's you. Who are you? Do I know you? Yes, you know me. It's me. No, it can't be. Oh, my God. You. It's really you. Yes, it's me. I'm here now. What is happening?
My daughter-in-law looked at my camel-colored coat, pinched the sleeve between two fingers, and laughed loud enough for half the charity luncheon table to hear. "Sadie, you knew this was a donor event, right?" Vanessa said. "You didn't have to dress like one of the people the charity serves." A few women shifted uncomfortably. My son stared at his plate and whispered, "Mom, just ignore it." I was about to answer when the elegant silver-haired woman beside me turned sharply. She studied my face, then leaned closer. "Excuse me," she said, her voice suddenly trembling. "Where did we meet?" I recognized her voice before I recognized her face. And when I finally did, I understood something Vanessa didn't. That $24 coat was about to become the least embarrassing thing at our table. If you've ever been judged by someone who thought appearances mattered more than character, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And while you're here, please like and subscribe if stories about family dignity and second chances mean something to you. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I never learned to be ashamed of secondhand things. 3 weeks before that luncheon, the camel-colored coat was still hanging on a crowded rack in the back corner of a church thrift store, and Vanessa had not yet given me a reason to understand how deeply embarrassed she had become by the way I lived. At 68, I had reached an age when I no longer felt much need to impress strangers. I lived in the same brick house in Richmond, Virginia, where my husband Frank and I had raised our only son. It was not grand, but it was solid. 2 stories, white shutters, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree. Frank planted the summer Michael turned 4. Every autumn its leaves covered the front yard faster than I could rake them. Frank used to tease me about that. "Sadie, you know those leaves are going to fall again next year, and I'll rake them again next year." That sounds like a terrible business model. He had been gone 6 years, and sometimes I still heard his voice when I was doing something ordinary. That was the hardest part of losing a husband after 43 years. Grief did not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it came while folding towels, sometimes while opening a jar, sometimes while noticing that only one coffee cup was drying beside the sink. Frank had worked in residential construction for most of his life. I worked with clothes. That was the simplest way I described it. I began as a seamstress in the alterations department of a downtown department store when I was 22. Later I worked for bridal shops' men's stores, and eventually rented a narrow storefront where a hand-painted sign over the door read, "Price Alterations." For more than 20 years, people brought me everything. Wedding dresses that needed taking in, funeral suits that had not been worn since the last funeral, prom gowns bought one size too small because a girl had fallen in love with the color, work pants with knees worn thin, winter coats with broken linings. I loved the work because clothes told the truth about people. A wealthy woman could bring me a $3,000 jacket and worry over every dollar of the repair. A waitress could bring me a $20 dress and apologize for asking me to save it because she needed something decent for her daughter's graduation. I never judged either one. Fabric was fabric. A seam did not care how much money you had in the bank. By the time I retired, Frank and I had paid off the mortgage, saved carefully, and built a comfortable life. After his death, I had his pension, my retirement savings, and enough in the bank that I did not worry about groceries or property taxes. I was not wealthy. I was not struggling. I was simply careful. Apparently careful had become an embarrassing word. I still drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry because it started every morning. I still used the oak dining table Frank and I bought when Michael was in middle school because it had survived birthday cakes, homework, Thanksgiving dinners, and one unfortunate attempt by Michael to build a volcano for science class. I carried the same brown leather handbag for 11 years because I had replaced the zipper myself. And yes, I shopped at thrift stores, not because I had to, because I liked them. There was something satisfying about finding an object someone else had given up on and seeing what it could become with patience. Vanessa never understood that. My daughter-in-law was 39 and worked in corporate communications for a healthcare company downtown. She was intelligent, polished, and very good at understanding what people wanted to see. Her hair was always professionally styled. Her nails always matched the season. She knew which restaurants had become fashionable before Michael had learned how to pronounce their names. None of those things bothered me. What bothered me was the way she had started looking at ordinary things as if they were moral failures. It began subtly. One Sunday evening, she and Michael came over for pot roast. Vanessa entered my kitchen, looked at the ceramic serving dish in my hands, and smiled. "You still have that?" I looked down. The dish was cream-colored with tiny blue flowers around the edge. "Why wouldn't I? I remember it from when Michael and I first started dating. That means it has excellent survival instincts." Michael laughed. Vanessa did not. She ran one finger over a small chip near the handle. "You know, Sadie, you could buy something updated. You don't have to keep things until they fall apart." I placed the carrots in the dish. "It still holds carrots." She looked at Michael. He shrugged. "That's Mom." At the time, I laughed too. A week later, she commented on my handbag, then my car, then the curtains in the guest bedroom, then the winter boots I had resold instead of replacing. Each comment was small enough to dismiss. Taken separately, they sounded almost helpful. Together, they began to feel like an inspection. Michael noticed none of it. Or perhaps he noticed and decided it was easier not to. That was becoming a pattern with my son. How was 41 tall, like Frank, with the same habit of rubbing the back of his neck when uncomfortable. He worked as an operations director for a regional architecture firm and had spent years building a stable career. I was proud of him. I had always been proud of him. But somewhere in the past few years, he had become much more concerned with appearances than the boy I remembered raising. Hi and Vanessa had moved into a newer development west of the city. Their kitchen had marble countertops, appliances connected to their phones, and bar stools no one ever seemed comfortable sitting on. There was nothing wrong with success. Frank and I had wanted Michael to have opportunities we did not. What surprised me was how quickly comfort could make a person forget that there were good people living without it. The change became more noticeable after Vanessa joined the Richmond Women's Renewal Foundation. I first heard about the organization during dinner at their house. Vanessa set down a bowl of salad and said, "I've started volunteering with a women's foundation." "That sounds worthwhile," I said. "It is, very." She told me they helped women facing unemployment, housing instability, divorce, and sudden financial hardship. They funded job training, temporary housing assistance, interview clothing, and small business workshops. That caught my attention. What kind of job training? All sorts. Office skills, resume preparation, financial education, some vocational programs. I put down my fork. "That's good work." Vanessa smiled. "It's very respected." That answer stayed with me. I had asked whether the work was good. She had told me it was respected. Over the next few months, the foundation seemed to become the center of Vanessa's life. There were committee dinners, fundraisers, planning meetings, photographs at galas. Michael regularly showed me pictures on his phone. Vanessa standing beside local executives. Vanessa speaking behind a podium. Vanessa holding a giant ceremonial check. I was glad she had found something meaningful. At least I wanted to believe meaning was what she had found. Then the little remarks about me grew sharper. One Saturday, Vanessa stopped by while I was outside trimming rosemary near the porch. She had come to pick up a set of linen napkins I had repaired for her. When I handed them over, she noticed the cardigan I was wearing. "Is that second-hand?" I looked down. "Yes," she sighed. Not dramatically, almost sadly. "Sadie, what, you don't need to do that anymore." "Do what?" "Shop like that." I straightened. "Like what?" She hesitated, apparently realizing how the sentence sounded. "You know what I mean." "I'm not sure I do." She lowered her voice. "You have money. Michael told me you're comfortable." I stared at her. It was not the fact that Michael had discussed my finances with his wife that bothered me. Married couples talked about family. It was the implication beneath her words. If I had money, why was I behaving like someone who did not? I smiled. "Vanessa, I bought this sweater for $8. It's cashmere." She blinked. That isn't the point. It feels like a very good point to me. She laughed once, but there was no warmth in it. I just think people make assumptions. About what? About you. People who... She adjusted the strap of her handbag. Anyone. I looked at the expensive leather bag hanging from her shoulder, then at my garden gloves. Do their assumptions change the quality of the sweater? You always turn everything into a joke. No. Sometimes I turn ridiculous things into jokes. Her lips tightened. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she said, I'm only trying to help. That phrase had become increasingly common. I'm only trying to help. It was remarkable how often people said it immediately after making you feel smaller. When Michael called that evening, I mentioned the conversation. He laughed. Vanessa's just particular about presentation. She seemed very concerned about mine. You know how she is. Yes, I said quietly. I'm beginning to. There was a pause. Mom, don't take it personally. I looked across my living room at a framed photograph of Frank standing beside Michael on his college graduation day. Michael, when someone comments on my clothes, my house, my car, and my handbag, I'm not sure how else I'm supposed to take it. He exhaled. I'll talk to her. He never did. Or if he did, nothing changed. The following Sunday, they came over for coffee. Vanessa walked through my living room slowly looking around, as though seeing it for the first time. Her gaze settled on an old wooden side table near the window. That table would look amazing refinished. It is refinished. You did it, Frank and I did. She gave me the same polite smile. I mean professionally. Something in me hardened then. Not anger exactly. Recognition. I had spent my entire adult life repairing things other people believed needed replacing. Clothes, furniture, budgets, occasionally people. I had never learned to be ashamed of something simply because it had been used before. Vanessa had. The irony was that she was now volunteering for an organization devoted to women who were rebuilding their lives. Women who had lost jobs, homes, marriages, confidence. Women who often depended on donated clothes, used furniture, food assistance, and second chances. Yet Vanessa could barely hide her discomfort when her own mother-in-law carried a handbag that was not new. I wondered if she understood the contradiction. I did not ask. Not then. Instead, I changed the subject and served coffee in the floral cups Frank and I had owned for 31 years. 2 weeks later, Michael called me on a Tuesday afternoon. He sounded unusually cheerful. Mom, what are you doing on Saturday the 23rd? I don't know yet. Good. Don't make plans. Why, Vanessa wants to invite you to the Foundation's annual luncheon. I glanced at the calendar beside the refrigerator. That's surprising. He laughed. Why? Because your wife seems to wish everything about me came with a higher price tag, I thought, but I did not say it. Instead, I asked, what kind of luncheon? Big event. Donors, board members, some local business people. Vanessa's involved in organizing it. That sounds important to her. It is. There was a pause. Then Michael added, she really wants you there. Something in his voice sounded rehearsed. I noticed it immediately. Still, I agreed to think about it. After we hung up, I stood alone in my kitchen looking at the phone. I did not know yet that Michael had pressured Vanessa to invite me. I did not know that the foundation had become tied to something much larger than volunteer work for her. And I certainly did not know that somewhere in Richmond, a woman I had not seen in 29 years was preparing to attend that same luncheon. All I knew was that my daughter-in-law had suddenly decided I belonged in a room full of people she desperately wanted to impress. And for some reason, that made me more uneasy than being left out ever had. The invitation I almost refused. Vanessa called me herself the next evening. That was the first sign the luncheon invitation was more complicated than Michael had made it sound. Usually, if there was a family dinner, birthday gathering, or holiday plan, Michael was the one who called. Vanessa preferred text messages. Short ones, efficient ones. The kind that made family arrangements feel like appointments. Dinner Sunday, 6:30. Bring dessert if you want. We're leaving by 9. So when my phone rang and her name appeared on the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hello, Sadie, hi. Her voice was bright in the careful way people sound when they are smiling for someone who cannot see them. Hi, Vanessa. I hope Michael told you about the luncheon. He mentioned it. Good. I wanted to personally invite you. Personally. That word made me smile. Well, thank you. It's going to be beautiful. We're expecting around 300 people. Some major donors, foundation board members, business leaders, local press. It's one of our biggest events of the year. I see. And this year is especially important. There was a pause. I could hear traffic somewhere behind her. Why, especially? Oh, just a lot happening with the foundation. She said it quickly. Too quickly. I waited. Vanessa hated silence. It made her fill spaces she had intended to keep empty. Finally, she added, they're expanding some leadership roles. There it was. I sat down at the kitchen table. Are you applying for one? Another pause. Nothing is official. That wasn't what I asked. She laughed. Yes. There's a new executive position opening. Congratulations. Thank you. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But she already had. I could hear it in her voice. Vanessa was not volunteering at the luncheon merely because she believed in the cause. The event was an audition. She continued describing the day. There would be a keynote speaker, a silent auction, a presentation about women re-entering the workforce. Several major sponsors would attend. Then her voice changed, just slightly. Oh, and Sadie. Yes. Do you already know what you're wearing? I looked down at the cotton blouse I had worn while cleaning out my sewing cabinet. No. I was thinking maybe we could go shopping. For what? For the luncheon. I own clothes. I know. The answer came too fast. I leaned back in my chair. Then why would we need to go shopping? Vanessa laughed again, but this time she sounded uncomfortable. It could be fun. You don't like shopping with me. That's not true. Last Christmas you told Michael you would rather have dental work than wait while I compare sweater seams. She was quiet. I smiled despite myself. I wasn't offended. I thought it was funny. That was a joke. So was mine. She sighed. Sadie, this is a fairly formal event. I understand. Not black tie formal, just polished. Polished. Yes. I knew exactly what she meant. She wanted to inspect me before I entered the room. I stood and walked toward the window over the sink. Outside, the maple tree branches moved in the evening wind. Vanessa, are you worried I'll show up in gardening clothes? Of course not. Then I think I can manage. I'm only trying to make sure you feel comfortable. There it was again. I'm only trying to help. I kept my voice calm. I feel comfortable in most clothes that fit. That's not exactly what I mean. I know. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, Michael really wants you there. The wording caught me. Michael really wants you there. Not I really want you there. I turned away from the window. Did Michael ask you to invite me? No. She answered too quickly. Vanessa. Another sigh. Fine. He mentioned that you hadn't been included in some things lately. Some things, a few dinners. A few. You know what I mean. I did. Over the previous year, there had been a business Christmas reception, 2 dinners with Michael's colleagues, Vanessa's birthday brunch, and a neighborhood gathering I learned about only because Michael accidentally mentioned it afterward. I had never confronted them. Adults were allowed to have lives that did not include their mothers. But exclusion felt different when someone later pretended it had never happened. So this invitation was Michael's idea. He thought it would be nice. And I agreed. That told me enough. I nearly declined right then. Not because my feelings were hurt, at least not entirely. I simply had no desire to spend an afternoon in a ballroom pretending my presence had been eagerly requested when it had actually been negotiated. I'll think about it, I said. Vanessa sounded surprised. Oh, was I supposed to say yes immediately? No, of course not. I'll let you know. All right. Just before hanging up, she added, and if you change your mind about shopping, tell me. I smiled. I won't. The next morning, I drove to St. Matthew's Church. I had been donating there for years. The church operated a thrift shop out of an old brick building beside the fellowship hall. Twice a month, I brought fabric remnants, extra buttons, zippers, thread, and anything else that might be useful to people who sewed. The woman working behind the counter that morning was named Linda. She was 62 with bright red reading glasses and the energy of someone who believed every donated object had a destiny. Sadie, she pointed at the box in my arms. Please tell me that's fabric. Mostly. I knew I liked you. You say that whenever I bring free things, and I mean it every time. I carried the box into the sorting area. For the next 20 minutes, we separated cotton remnants from upholstery fabric, while Linda told me about her granddaughter's new job. Before leaving, I wandered through the clothing section. I had no intention of buying anything. That was usually when I found the best things. The coat was hanging near the back. Camel-colored wool, knee-length, simple lines, good construction. I noticed the fabric first, then the stitching. Most people looked at the label before deciding whether a garment was worth touching. I looked at the seams. Whoever had made that coat knew what they were doing. The lining had torn near the left shoulder. One button was missing. The shoulders were slightly too wide for modern fashion, and the cuffs had been folded poorly, but the wool itself was excellent. I pulled it from the rack, found something Linda called. Maybe. I slipped it on. The fit surprised me. The waist sat almost perfectly. The sleeves needed shortening. The shoulders required reshaping. Nothing difficult. Linda walked over. Oh, that's nice. It could be. She laughed. You never see anything the way it is. That's because most things aren't finished yet. I checked the price tag, $24. Linda leaned closer. What do you think? I think somebody got tired of it before it got tired of being useful. She smiled. You're taking it. I probably am. On the drive home, the coat lay across the back seat. I thought about Vanessa's shopping offer. I thought about polished rooms and expensive clothes and people who might decide what someone was worth before that person even opened her mouth. Then I thought about Frank. Years earlier, whenever I brought home a damaged garment, he would inspect it and say, "You're adopting another lost cause. They're not lost causes. You said that about the lamp. The lamp works. The lamp shocks people, only if they touch the switch wrong." He would laugh and kiss my forehead. That memory stayed with me as I carried the coat into my sewing room. The room had once been Michael's bedroom. After he left for college, I slowly converted it. My old machine sat beneath the window. Shelves held thread organized by color. Frank had built the cutting table himself. I placed the coat beneath the lamp and began examining it properly. The torn lining was worse than I had first thought. Someone had attempted a repair with glue. I shook my head. Poor thing. Yes, I talk to clothes sometimes. 40 years in alterations does that to a person. I removed the damaged stitching carefully. Then I opened part of the shoulder seam, reduced the padding, reshaped the line, and pinned the sleeve. It felt good, familiar. The quiet concentration of needle thread fabric and hands. For nearly 2 hours I forgot about Vanessa. By late afternoon the coat looked transformed. Not new, better than new. New clothes had no history. This one did. I found 4 dark horn buttons in an old tin and replaced the entire set so they matched. I shortened the sleeves, pressed the collar, repaired the lining by hand. When I finally tried it on in front of the full-length mirror, I stood very still. The coat was elegant, understated, timeless, and something about it pulled at a memory I had not visited in years. Women around folding tables, coffee in foam cups, children doing homework in the corner, old sewing machines, humming beneath fluorescent lights. A woman crying because she had ruined the first zipper she ever tried to install. Another woman laughing because she had finally finished hemming a skirt straight. Frank carrying in 3 donated machines and announcing, "Ladies, your repair department has arrived. St. Matthew's basement." I closed my eyes. For a moment I could almost smell the starch and burnt coffee. Those years had been difficult, but they had also been among the most meaningful years of my life. I ran my hand across the coat sleeve. Funny how fabric could hold memories it had never actually witnessed. My phone rang. "Michael," I answered. So he said, So what are you coming Saturday?" I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had gray hairlines around her eyes and a $24 coat that looked as though it had been tailored specifically for her. "Yes," I said. Michael sounded relieved. Great. I found something to wear. Good. He hesitated. Did you go shopping with Vanessa? No. Oh, I handled it myself. There was another pause. Then he said, as long as you're comfortable. I almost laughed. That word again. Comfortable. Everyone seemed very concerned about my comfort. No one had asked about my dignity. After we hung up, I removed the coat and placed it carefully on a padded hanger. I still had not decided what dress I would wear beneath it. That part did not matter much. But standing there looking at the repaired wool, I made one decision. I would not tell Vanessa where I bought it unless she asked. Not because I was ashamed, quite the opposite. I simply wanted to see whether she could recognize quality without being told what it cost. I thought that would be the only test the coat created. I was wrong, because while I was repairing those old seams in my quiet little house, Vanessa was preparing for something far more important than a luncheon. She was preparing to convince some of Richmond's most influential women that she understood dignity, hardship, and second chances. And neither of us knew yet that one of those women had learned those lessons in a church basement nearly 30 years earlier. From me. Vanessa's version of compassion. 2 nights after I finished repairing the coat, Michael came over carrying takeout from a Thai restaurant he knew I liked. That should have warned me. My son had inherited one of Frank's habits. When he had something difficult to say, he brought food. Frank used to arrive home with pie whenever he had spent more money than he meant to at the hardware store. Michael brought noodles. Pad see ew, he said, lifting the paper bag as I opened the door. Extra vegetables, what did you do? He laughed. Why do you assume I did something because you're feeding me? I feed you all the time. You bring me coffee. Coffee means you love me. Dinner means you want something. He shook his head and followed me into the kitchen. For a while, everything felt normal. We ate at the old oak table Vanessa believed should have been replaced years ago. Michael told me about a difficult project at work. I told him the neighbor's dog had learned how to open her backyard gate. Then halfway through dinner, he said, Vanessa has some big news. There it was. I set down my fork. He smiled with genuine pride. The foundation is creating a paid executive position, director of community engagement, the job she mentioned. His eyebrows lifted. She told you? She said something about leadership roles. Well, she's one of the final candidates. That's wonderful. And I meant it. Whatever tension existed between Vanessa and me, I knew she worked hard. I also knew how much professional recognition meant to her. Michael leaned forward. It would be a huge step. How huge? More responsibility. Better salary. She'd oversee partnerships, public campaigns, donor relations, some of the workforce programs. That sounds like a lot. It is. But she's good at that stuff. He sounded like the boy who used to tell me every detail when he made the starting lineup in baseball. That softened me. I hope it works out for her. She's been putting everything into it. I can tell. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. They love the campaign she developed. What campaign? Second chances. My fork stopped halfway to my plate. What did you say? Second chances? That's the name. I looked at him. He did not seem to notice my expression. She developed this whole initiative about women rebuilding after financial setbacks. Job loss, divorce, housing instability. It's apparently getting a lot of attention. Something uncomfortable moved through me. Not because the phrase was extraordinary. Second chances belong to everyone. No one could claim ownership of 2 ordinary words. Still something about it scratched at an old memory. What does the campaign do? Michael shrugged. Stories, workshops, outreach. I don't know all the details. Stories about whom women the foundation has helped, I think. He reached for more noodles. And some background material about families who went through hard times. I watched him carefully. What kind of background material? Michael finally looked up. What you said Vanessa used background material. Oh. His tone changed. Only slightly. Some old things from you and Dad. My hand went still. What old things? He hesitated. I knew immediately that he had hoped to mention this casually and move past it before I asked questions. Remember when you cleaned out the attic? Yes, you gave me those boxes. I gave you 3 boxes of your school papers and some of your father's construction records. And another box. I frowned. What other box? The one with your old sewing stuff. My chest tightened. No, Michael. I didn't give you that. He leaned back. I thought you did. What was in it, I don't know. Newsletters, notes, some typed pages, photos. I stared at him. The food between us suddenly smelled too strong. Where is that box now at our house? Why? When you were clearing things out, I loaded it with the others. You were supposed to take your things. I thought it was part of the pile. And Vanessa went through it. He rubbed the back of his neck. There was Frank again. Not in his face, in that gesture. She was looking for ideas. For what the campaign? I pushed my chair back slightly. Michael, what exactly did she use? He sighed. Mom, don't make this into something. That sentence hurt before I even knew why. I'm asking a question. I know. Then answer it. He sat quietly for a moment. She liked some of the stories. What stories? The women you worked with. I felt something old and private open inside me. Those women. Names came back immediately. Marlene, Eleanor, Teresa, Donna. Women who had sat across from me, frightened, ashamed, exhausted, furious, determined. Women who had told me things about their husbands, their debts, their children, their fear of eviction, their fear of being alone. Things they had trusted me with because they believed those stories were safe. I lowered my voice. Those weren't stories for a campaign. They're decades old. That doesn't make them public. She changed names. That isn't the point. Michael leaned back. Vanessa wasn't exploiting anyone. She was inspired by what you did. Inspired. It was such a generous word. What did she say she was inspired by? Michael reached for his phone. Actually, there's a video. I don't think I want to see it. Mom, just watch. Before I could refuse again, he had opened something and placed the phone on the table between us. Vanessa appeared on the screen. She stood in a bright, modern room, wearing a navy blazer, speaking directly to the camera. Behind her was the foundation logo. Her voice was warm, measured, compassionate. Too often, she said, we mistake financial hardship for personal failure. But a woman's circumstances do not determine her value. My stomach tightened. Vanessa continued. A woman may enter a thrift store because she has lost a job, escaped a marriage, or simply needs to stretch $20 until Friday. What she wears should never determine the respect she receives. I stopped breathing for a second. Michael was smiling. Good, right, I did not answer. The video continued. Vanessa spoke about practical training, about women rediscovering confidence through work, about teaching skills rather than creating dependence. Then she said, real dignity begins when we stop asking, what does she need from us? And start asking, what can she still do for herself? I reached for the phone and paused the video. Michael frowned. What? Where did she get that? Get what, that sentence? He shrugged. She wrote the campaign. No. I shook my head slowly. I wrote that. Michael stared at me. What do you mean, not exactly those words? But close enough. I stood and walked toward the old hutch where I kept photographs and papers. My hands were trembling. Years earlier, I had written short talks for church groups that supported our sewing program. I had forgotten most of them, but certain phrases stayed with you when they had come from something deeply lived. I remembered standing in a church basement explaining why we should stop treating struggling women as helpless. I remembered saying, don't begin by asking what a woman lacks. Ask what she already knows how to do. The wording in Vanessa's video was polished, modernized, but the heart of it was mine. I turned back. How much did she take? Michael looked genuinely confused now. Mom, she didn't take anything. Then what do you call using my notes without asking? She adapted them. For a job she wants. It's not like she published your name. That may be worse. He stared at me. What does that mean? It means she used the work without acknowledging where it came from. Michael's expression hardened. Why are you acting like she stole a book? Because you are acting like it didn't matter. His jaw tightened. This campaign helps people. I hope it does. Then what's the problem? The problem is that she never asked. There was a silence between us. I sat down again. Does she talk about me? Michael looked away. That was answer enough. What does she say? Nothing bad. Michael. He exhaled through his nose. She mentions your family. My family is your family. You know what I mean. No, I want you to tell me. He looked uncomfortable now. She talks about growing up around people who knew financial struggle. She did not grow up around us. I know. So she says marrying into the family exposed her to stories about women who had lived with very little. The words landed slowly. I felt something colder than anger. She tells people I lived in poverty. Not exactly. What exactly? She doesn't name you. That wasn't my question. Michael stood and carried his empty container toward the trash. Mom, you and Dad did struggle. For 18 months. I know. We never went hungry. I know. We never lost the house. I know. We paid every debt we owed. I know. Then why is your wife telling people she discovered poverty through your family? He turned around sharply. She's not saying it like that. You just said she was. No, you're twisting it. I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp I could taste it. I'm twisting it. Michael closed his eyes briefly. Look, maybe she simplified some things for the campaign. Simplified. It's communications. Stories have to be clear. People's lives are rarely clear. He did not answer. I looked at the frozen image of Vanessa still glowing on his phone. Her expression was compassionate, her posture confident, her message admirable. And that was what made it hurt. If she had simply misunderstood my past, I could have corrected her. If she had mocked the women I helped, I could have dismissed her ignorance. But she had done something stranger. She had borrowed the language of compassion while privately treating the evidence of hardship as something shameful. I thought about my cardigan, my handbag, my car, the dish with the chipped handle, all those small comments, all that concern about what people might assume. Then I looked at the paused video again. A woman's circumstances do not determine her value. I pressed play. Near the end, Vanessa smiled into the camera. My belief in second chances comes from seeing how dignity can transform a family. I stopped the video again. Did you give her permission? Michael frowned. For what? To use my papers. They were in my house. That is not what I asked. I didn't think I needed permission. I stared at my son. Something in my face must have reached him because his defensiveness weakened. Were there personal testimonials in that box? I don't know. Handwritten ones I really don't know. Letters from women, maybe. I closed my eyes. Those were not marketing materials. They were pieces of people's lives. Some women had written thank you letters. Some had written reflections for the church board. Some had written about things they survived. I had kept them because they mattered to me. Not because I imagined my daughter-in-law might one day mine them for professional material. Michael sat down again. I'll talk to Vanessa. You should. She probably didn't realize this would upset you. That's part of the problem. He looked at me. What do you mean she knows enough about my life to borrow from it? I pointed toward the phone, but apparently not enough to respect it. He said nothing. After a moment, I asked, does anyone at the foundation know those ideas came from my old program? Michael hesitated. I don't know. Does Vanessa? Yes. Then she knows enough. His shoulders dropped. Please don't turn this into a confrontation before the luncheon. There it was. The real concern. Not whether I had been hurt. Not whether private materials had been used. The luncheon. Vanessa's opportunity. Her image. I looked at my son for a long time. You're asking me to stay quiet. I'm asking you not to assume the worst. I haven't assumed anything. You just showed me the video. Mom. Michael. If Vanessa asks, I'll speak to her privately. I am not planning to walk into a ballroom and accuse your wife of anything. He visibly relaxed. And that hurt too. The fact that he had believed I might embarrass her before considering whether she had embarrassed me. When he left, I cleared the table alone. Then I returned to the phone conversation in my mind. Second chances. The phrase still bothered me. I went upstairs to my sewing room and opened the bottom drawer of an old filing cabinet. Most of the second stitch papers were gone. That confirmed what Michael had said, but one thin folder remained. Inside were several old church bulletins, 2 photographs, and a yellowed sheet of paper with notes in my handwriting. At the top, I had written, "Second stitch, volunteer talk." Below it, one sentence was underlined twice. Never confused, needing help with having nothing to offer, I sat down. For years I had not thought of those words as mine. They belonged to another version of me. A younger woman who had worried about the mortgage at night, worked until her fingers cramped and still found room in her week to teach someone else how to sew a straight seam. I touched the page. Then I remembered something else. A woman sitting beside an old sewing machine crying because she had broken the thread for the 5th time. She had 2 teenage daughters. Her husband had left. Her rent was overdue. And she kept apologizing for being useless. I had taken the fabric from her hands and said, "You are not useless. You are scared. Those are different things." I could no longer remember exactly what became of her. Only her eyes. And the way she eventually learned to sew a perfect hem. I had no idea that she was still in Richmond. I had no idea she would be sitting beside me at the luncheon. And I certainly had no idea that Vanessa's future might soon depend on the opinion of the very kind of woman she claimed to understand. The years. Michael never understood. For most of Michael's childhood, I protected him from knowing how frightened his father and I sometimes were. At the time, I thought that was good parenting. Years later, I began to wonder whether protecting a child from hardship could also protect him from understanding the sacrifices that built his life. Michael was 6 when Frank's construction business nearly collapsed. It happened slowly at first. One customer delayed payment, then another. A contractor Frank regularly worked with declared bankruptcy and left several smaller businesses unpaid. Within 3 months, Frank had invoices stacked on our kitchen counter that looked like money but could not buy groceries. I still remember the night he sat at the oak table with a calculator in one hand and both elbows resting beside a pile of bills. Michael was asleep upstairs. I came into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Frank did not look up. "How bad?" I asked. He pressed the calculator button again, as if the number might change out of sympathy. "Bad." That was unusual for him. Frank believed every problem became smaller if you gave it a joke. That night, there were no jokes. "We can make the mortgage," he said. "This month. And next month." He looked at me. "I don't know." I sat down. We had savings, but not enough to survive indefinitely. I was already working 4 days a week at a department store alterations department. I began taking private sewing jobs at home after Michael went to bed. I hemmed pants at 10 o'clock at night, replaced zippers before breakfast, adjusted bridesmaid dresses at our dining table while Michael colored beside me. Frank took every construction job he could find. Some weeks were better, some were worse. For almost 18 months, our lives became an exercise in calculating what could wait. New tires could wait. The bathroom faucet could drip. My winter boots could last another season. Restaurant dinners disappeared. Vacations disappeared. But Michael's world remained mostly unchanged. That mattered to us. He stayed on his baseball team. He attended birthday parties. He had a Halloween costume. At Christmas, there were fewer presents, but enough that a 6-year-old boy would not notice why. Some of his clothes came from thrift stores. He never knew. I would buy jeans for $3, replace worn knees, adjust the waist, press them carefully, and place them in his drawer. Once he ran downstairs wearing a blue jacket I had found at a church rummage sale. "Mom, did you get me this?" "I did. It looks brand new," I smiled. "It practically is." That answer was technically true by the time I finished with it. I never wanted him to associate secondhand things with embarrassment. To us, they were simply useful things that still had life left in them. During that difficult period, St. Matthew's Church became an important part of our routine. We were not especially religious people, but the church ran a food pantry, childcare programs, and a community center that welcomed anyone. I first started going there because a woman from my alterations department asked whether I could donate leftover fabric. One Thursday evening, I carried 2 boxes into the church basement. That basement changed my life. It was not impressive. Fluorescent lights, brown folding tables, metal chairs, an old coffee maker that seemed permanently stained. The room smelled faintly of detergent and floor wax. But every week women gathered there for support groups and employment workshops. Some had been laid off. Some were recently divorced. Some had escaped husbands who controlled every dollar. Some were living temporarily with relatives. Many had spent years caring for children and suddenly needed to enter the workforce with no recent experience. One evening, I saw a woman holding a blouse with a missing button. She was in her late 30s, maybe 40. She asked one of the volunteers if there was another blouse available because she needed something for a job interview the next morning. I looked at the blouse. "There's nothing wrong with that one." She gave me a tired smile. "There's a button missing." "I have buttons." 10 minutes later, I had replaced it. She stared at the blouse as though I had performed surgery. "You did that fast." "I've been sewing since I was 12. She hesitated. "Could you show me that was how it started? Not with a grant, not with a plan, not with a committee meeting, with one missing button." The following Thursday, 3 women were waiting for me. One wanted to learn how to hem pants, another needed to repair a skirt. The third had bought a used sewing machine but did not know how to thread it. I stayed for 2 hours. The week after that, there were 7 women. I told Frank about it over dinner. He grinned. "You accidentally started a class." "I did not start anything." 7 people waiting for you. You sound suspiciously like something. "I'm just helping." He pointed his fork at me. "That is usually how you start things." Within 2 months, the church gave us permanent use of one corner of the basement on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Donated machines appeared. Some worked, most did not. Frank began repairing them. He would come downstairs after construction jobs, still wearing work boots, sit at a folding table with screwdrivers spread around him, and mutter at stubborn machines like they had personally offended him. The women adored him. Mr. Frank 1 would call this one is making that noise again. They all make noises. This one sounds angry. So do I. Doesn't mean I'm broken. Then he would fix it. We called the program Second Stitch. The name came from Teresa, a young mother who had been sleeping on her sister's couch with 2 children after leaving a violent marriage. One night she held up a crooked practice seam and said, "Maybe everybody deserves a second stitch." The room went quiet. Then someone said, "That's the name." So it became the name. Second Stitch was never only about sewing. That was simply where we began. While people practiced hemming, we talked. Women asked how to price alteration work, how to open checking accounts, how to answer questions during job interviews, how to explain years spent raising children without calling those years doing nothing. We found volunteers who understood bookkeeping. A retired teacher helped with resumes. A bank employee offered a basic budgeting workshop. The church donated a small storage room. Someone contributed an old filing cabinet. Someone else donated an iron. Everything came from somewhere. Nothing matched. It worked anyway. I still remember Marlene, who had spent 22 years married to a man who handled every bill. When he left her, she did not know how to write a check. She was ashamed of that. I told her, not knowing something is not shameful. Refusing to learn it might be. 6 months later, she was doing bookkeeping for a small dental office. Then there was Donna, who learned to alter uniforms and eventually found work at a dry cleaner. Teresa opened a tiny home-based sewing service. And Eleanor. For years, I had not allowed myself to think too deeply about Eleanor, because I remembered mostly the pain in her face. She arrived one rainy evening carrying a plastic grocery bag. Inside were 2 skirts, 3 blouses, and an old pair of scissors. She was 43. Her husband had left suddenly. He had emptied most of their joint account before disappearing. She had 2 teenage daughters and rent due in less than 2 weeks. "I don't belong here," she told me. "Why not?" "I don't know how to do anything." I hated that sentence. Not because she said it, because somebody had taught her to believe it. "What did you do before you got married?" "I worked in an office." "For how long?" 4 years. "What did you do after you got married?" "Raised my daughters." "For how long?" 19 years. "So you managed schedules, groceries, transportation appointments, bills." "My husband paid the bills." "Did you know what groceries cost?" "Yes." "Did your daughters get to school?" She almost smiled. Yes. Did they get to doctors? Yes. Did birthdays happen? Yes. Then stop telling me you did nothing. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she began crying. Not dramatically. Silently. She covered her mouth because she was embarrassed. I sat beside her until she stopped apologizing. Her first attempt at sewing was terrible. She broke thread constantly. Her seams wandered. She once installed a zipper backward. When she realized what she had done, she stared at it and said, "That seems about right for my life." I laughed. She laughed too. Then I made her remove it and do it again. You don't get to quit because the first try is ugly. She learned. More importantly, she began changing. Within months, she found an entry-level office position at a local textile distributor. She still came to second stitch after work. One evening, she walked into the basement wearing a navy skirt she had altered herself. She stood in front of me and turned once. Well, I pretended to inspect the hem. Acceptable. She put her hands on her hips. Acceptable, fine. Very good. She smiled so widely that everyone in the room laughed. I remember that smile. But life moved quickly. Frank's work recovered. Our finances stabilized. Michael grew older. Second Stitch grew too. What began as a handful of women eventually served dozens each year. Some came for one workshop. Others stayed months. I continued volunteering for nearly 12 years. Eventually, another nonprofit organization partnered with St. Matthew's and absorbed much of the program. They had better funding, paid staff, computers, actual classrooms. It was time. I returned my attention to my alteration business and family. Second Stitch became something I remembered with gratitude but rarely discussed. Michael remembered almost none of it. He remembered that I sewed. He remembered Frank repairing machines. He remembered being brought to the church basement sometimes after baseball practice. But he had been a child. To him, those women were simply adults talking while his mother worked. He never knew why they were there, and I never told him. Maybe that was my mistake. I wanted him to remember childhood as safe. I did not want him to know his father had once stared at mortgage bills at midnight. I did not want him to know his mother sometimes skipped lunch because there was only enough money set aside for the week's groceries. I did not tell him that his new clothes were sometimes carefully repaired donations. I wanted dignity to feel normal to him, not something purchased, not something earned, something every person deserved. Somewhere along the way, that lesson had changed. Now my son lived in a beautiful house and worried that my handbag looked old. My daughter-in-law spoke publicly about women who needed second chances while privately treating visible frugality as humiliation. And the strangest part was that the ideas Vanessa had borrowed were born during the very years Michael understood least. That night, I sat in my sewing room with the old Second Stitch folder in my lap. I studied one faded photograph. There were 12 women standing around folding tables. Frank was in the back holding a broken sewing machine. I was near the center, younger, thinner, my dark hair pinned away from my face. Eleanor stood near the edge. I recognized her now. Her expression was cautious, but she was smiling. I ran my finger across the photograph. 29 years had passed. I had no idea where most of those women were. I did not know which marriages healed, which careers lasted, which dreams survived. But I knew one thing. None of them had ever been the people the charity serves to me. They had names, families, skills, fear, pride, potential. They had been women, nothing less. And in less than a week, I would walk into a ballroom where my daughter-in-law believed compassion was part of the image she needed to succeed. I still did not know Eleanor Brooks would be there. But somewhere beneath my uneasiness, I had begun to sense that the past was not as buried as I thought. Please don't embarrass Vanessa. The evening before the luncheon, Michael came by without calling first. I knew something was wrong because he rarely did that anymore. When he was young, he would burst through the front door shouting "Mom," as though there were no possibility I might be anywhere else. As an adult, he texted before visits, checked his schedule, and usually arrived with some explanation for why he could only stay 20 minutes. That Friday night, I heard his car pull into the driveway just after 7. I opened the door before he knocked. "You look worried," I said. "I'm not worried. That means you're worried. He smiled, but only with his mouth. Can I come in? You're my son. You don't need an appointment. He stepped inside and shrugged off his jacket. His gaze moved almost immediately to the camel coat hanging from the hall closet door. I had steamed it one final time and placed it there so I would not forget it in the morning. Michael walked toward it. Is that new to me? He touched the sleeve. This is nice. Thank you. Really nice, actually. I watched him inspect the collar. For half a second I felt something almost childish inside me. Vindication. Not because I needed his approval, but because I knew exactly what was coming. I should have kept quiet. Instead I said, $24. He looked at me. What church thrift store? The change in his face was immediate, small but unmistakable. His fingers left the sleeve. Oh, there it was, one syllable. The entire problem between us lately compressed into one sound. I crossed my arms. You liked it 5 seconds ago. I still like it. You look like it changed. It didn't change. Then what did he gave me a tired look? Mom. What nothing. He turned away and walked toward the living room. I followed. Michael. Why are you here? He sat on the sofa but did not answer right away. I remained standing. He rubbed the back of his neck. That gesture had become a warning sign. Finally, he said, I just wanted to check in before tomorrow about the luncheon. I know where it is. That's not what I mean. I sat across from him. Then say what you mean. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. Vanessa's under a lot of pressure right now. I'm aware. She has interviews next week for the foundation position. Yes. And tomorrow matters. I waited. He looked toward the hallway where the coat was still visible, then back at me. Maybe you could wear something else. There was no reason for those words to hurt as much as they did. Vanessa had made comments for months. I had expected judgment from her. But Michael had complimented the coat before he knew its price. That was what stayed with me. He had seen something attractive. Then he learned it was second-hand. Suddenly it was a problem. I kept my voice even. What's wrong with it? Nothing. You just asked me not to wear it. I'm saying maybe you have another option. I do. Then why not wear that? I stared at him. Because I like this one. He exhaled. Mom, please. Please what? This doesn't need to become a thing. It wasn't a thing until you drove over here to discuss my coat. His jaw tightened. You know what Vanessa is like about these events. Yes, she gets nervous. So her nerves determine my wardrobe, no. That sounds like exactly what you're saying. He stood and paced toward the window. Outside, the porch light cast a pale circle over the front steps. People notice things, he said. I almost laughed. People have eyes. That's true, Mom. Michael. What exactly are you afraid they'll notice? He turned. That it's from a thrift store. How would they know? You might tell them. That answer was so absurdly honest that I went quiet. He must have realized it too. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? He looked frustrated now. You have this thing where you're proud of buying something for $8. I am proud when I get something useful for $8. Yes, but tomorrow isn't the place for that. Why? Because it's a donor luncheon. And thrift stores stop existing when donors enter a room. That's not what I said. No. You're trying very hard not to say what you mean. His voice sharpened. Fine. People make judgments. I nodded slowly. Vanessa said the same thing. She's not wrong. There was a silence. I had expected him to defend her. I had not expected him to agree so easily. I looked at my son, and for a moment I saw a 7-year-old boy standing in our kitchen in a second-hand blue jacket turning around proudly because his mother had made it look new. He had loved that jacket. He had never asked what store it came from. He had only known he felt good wearing it. I wondered when he had learned to be ashamed of things I had worked so hard to make ordinary. Do you remember your blue winter coat? I asked. He frowned. What, the one you had in first grade? Navy blue, red lining. He shook his head. Not really. You wore it every day. Mom, what does that have to do with this? I bought it at a church rummage sale. His expression changed. I continued. It cost $4. One sleeve was torn. The zipper was broken. I repaired both. He stared at me. You never told me that. There was nothing to tell. He sat down again. I stayed where I was. That year, several of your clothes were second-hand. He looked almost offended. Why? Because your father's business was struggling. I knew things were tight. No, Michael. You knew we said no to restaurants more often. You didn't know how tight. He said nothing. I could have told him more. About the mortgage, about the bills, about taking private sewing work after he went to sleep, about Frank lying awake beside me. But that was not the conversation I wanted to have yet. Not fully. Instead, I said, "You went to school clean, warm, and loved. That was enough." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not saying there's anything wrong with secondhand clothes. Then why are you asking me to hide one?" He looked up quickly. "I'm not asking you to hide anything. You're asking me to change so nobody suspects it. That's different." How he did not answer. I leaned back. "There are going to be women at that luncheon tomorrow whose foundation supposedly helps women through financial hardship. Correct, yes. Women who need job training, yes. Women who may rely on donated clothes. Yes. So explain this to me. Why is it acceptable to stand at a podium praising those women, but embarrassing if someone at the table might discover I shop where they shop?" Michael's face hardened again. "This isn't about them, no. It's about Vanessa." "Yes, partly." "Then say it." He stood abruptly. "Fine. Vanessa is already stressed because she thinks you're angry about the campaign. I am concerned about the campaign. She thinks you might say something tomorrow. Did she send you here? No." That answer was too quick. "Michael." He looked away. "She mentioned that you seemed upset, and you decided to make sure I behave. I decided to make sure there isn't a misunderstanding in front of people who matter. People who matter." The phrase sat between us. I felt something inside me go very still. "Who matters, Michael?" He realized too late what he had said. "That's not what I meant." "Do I matter?" "Of course." "Do the women Vanessa claims to serve matter?" "Yes." "Then who exactly are these special people I'm supposed to behave differently around?" He rubbed his forehead. "This is impossible." "No, it's very simple." I pointed toward the hall. "That coat looked good until you knew where it came from." He said nothing. "You were proud of Vanessa's campaign until I asked where her ideas came from." Silence. "You're not worried that she did something wrong. That's not fair. You're worried I might mention it where important people can hear." He stared at me. I could see anger rising, but beneath it was something else. Guilt. He knew I was right. "Mom, I'm asking for one afternoon. One afternoon of what?" He lowered his voice. "Just, please don't embarrass Vanessa tomorrow." The room seemed to shrink. I heard the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. A car passed outside. Somewhere upstairs the old heating vent clicked, but all I could really hear were those words. "Please don't embarrass Vanessa." I looked at him for a long time. Then I asked, "Are you worried about how I'll behave?" He opened his mouth. I continued, "Or how I'll look." He did not answer. That hurt more than an answer would have. I stood. "I think you should go home." His face changed. "Mom, I'm tired. I didn't come here to upset you. You came here because you were afraid I might upset your wife. That's not the same thing. It feels very similar from where I'm sitting." He followed me into the hall. I took the coat from the closet door and held it over my arm. Michael looked at it. "Are you still wearing that?" I almost could not believe he asked. "Yes." He sighed. "Of course you are." Something about his tone did what Vanessa's comments had failed to do. For the first time I wondered whether I should stay home. Not because I was ashamed of the coat, because I was tired of walking into rooms where my own family expected me to justify myself. Michael reached the door. Before opening it, he turned. "I love you, Mom. I love you too." That was the worst part. Love did not make people incapable of hurting one another. Sometimes it simply made the hurt harder to dismiss. After he left, I locked the door and stood in the quiet hallway. The coat felt heavier over my arm. I carried it upstairs to my bedroom. For several minutes I stared at it. I imagined calling Michael. telling him I had changed my mind, telling Vanessa something had come up. Spending Saturday morning drinking coffee, tending my garden and avoiding an entire room full of people who would never know I had been invited. It would have been easy, maybe even peaceful. I removed the coat from the hanger and examined the lining. My hand found the seam I had repaired. Tiny stitches, almost invisible. I remembered Frank watching me repair an old dining chair once after a neighbor told us it was not worth saving. The neighbor had laughed. "You two keep everything." After he left, Frank ran his hand over the repaired wood. "People are strange," he said. "How so? They throw away perfectly good things because somebody else convinced them they should be embarrassed to still have them." Then he looked at me. "Never let somebody else's shame become yours, Sadie." I had forgotten that sentence. Or maybe I had simply not needed it for a long time. Now I did. I carried the coat back downstairs, hung it in the hallway, smoothed the collar. Then I turned off the light. I would attend the luncheon. I would wear the coat. I would not provoke Vanessa. I would not reveal private matters unless someone asked me directly. And I would not apologize for $24. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. By noon, I would be sitting in a ballroom beside people Michael believed mattered. By 1 o'clock, Vanessa would humiliate me in front of them. And by the time dessert was served, my son would begin discovering how little he truly knew about the woman he had just asked not to embarrass his wife. The table where I didn't belong. By 11:30 the next morning, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, wondering when clothing had become such an exhausting subject. I had chosen a simple black dress, beneath the camel coat, low heels, pearl earrings Frank had given me on our 30th anniversary, and the brown leather handbag Vanessa disliked. Everything fit, everything was clean, everything was mine. That should have been enough. Still, as I fastened the final button of the coat, Michael's words returned. "Please don't embarrass Vanessa." I looked at myself for several seconds. Then I said quietly, "You look perfectly fine, Sadie." The woman in the mirror looked unconvinced. I picked up my handbag and left anyway. The luncheon was being held at the Jefferson Hotel, one of those Richmond buildings designed to make you straighten your posture the moment you walked through the doors. The lobby gleamed with marble and polished brass. Tall arrangements of white flowers stood near the entrance. Women in tailored dresses and expensive coats moved through the space carrying handbags that probably cost more than my first sewing machine. I handed my coat to the attendant, then changed my mind. "I'll keep it." He smiled politely. "Of course, ma'am." The ballroom was upstairs. By the time I reached it, the room was already crowded. Round tables covered in white linen filled the space beneath chandeliers. Tall glass vases held pale pink roses and greenery. A stage stood at one end beneath a large screen displaying the Richmond Women's Renewal Foundation logo. Several photographers moved between tables. There were banners with phrases printed in elegant lettering. "Restoring dignity. Rebuilding futures. Second chances begin here." That last one stopped me. I stood in the doorway longer than I intended. Second chances. The phrase looked polished on the banner. Professional. Market-tested. But all I could see was a church basement. Folding tables. Bent needles. Frank carrying a broken sewing machine under one arm. "Sadie." Vanessa's voice snapped me back. She was walking toward me in a fitted cream-colored suit. She looked beautiful. I could admit that even when I was angry with her. Her hair was smooth, her makeup subtle, and a gold foundation badge was pinned near her collar. Then she saw the coat. Her eyes moved from my face to the wool. For 1 second she looked impressed. Then suspicious. "That's nice. Thank you. Is it vintage?" There was something almost hopeful in the question, as if vintage would be acceptable because it could imply exclusivity. I smiled. "No." Her eyes narrowed slightly. I could have left it there. Instead, perhaps because Michael had asked me not to say it, I told the truth. "Thrift-Store." Her smile froze. "What? $24." She looked around quickly. No one nearby seemed to be listening. "What, you're joking?" "No." She leaned closer. "You wore a thrift-store coat here, I wore a wool coat here." Her expression tightened. "You know what I mean." "Yes." Why would you tell people that no one asked except you? That's not the point. Then I'm beginning to think I don't understand the point. Vanessa inhaled. I could see her making the decision not to argue. Not here. Not while board members and donors were entering the room. She forced the smile back onto her face. Okay, fine, just come with me. She turned before I could answer. I followed her through the ballroom. What struck me first was how different Vanessa became when someone important approached. Her voice softened. Her shoulders changed. Her smile warmed. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm so glad you could come. David, thank you so much for supporting the employment initiative. Caroline, I loved your piece in the magazine. She knew names, spouses, job titles, who had recently changed companies, who served on which committee. It was impressive, also revealing. Vanessa did not simply enter rooms, she mapped them. At one point, a middle-aged woman in a blue dress approached us. Vanessa, wonderful event. Thank you so much. The woman looked at me. Vanessa hesitated. This is Sadie. Nothing else. Not my mother-in-law. Not Michael's mother. Just Sadie. I smiled and extended my hand. It's nice to meet you. You too. The woman asked Vanessa a question about seating. They moved on. I noticed the omission. Then I noticed it again 10 minutes later. This is Sadie. And again. Sadie came with us today. With us. It was almost amusing. By the fourth introduction, I wanted to say, I promise I am not an escaped stranger Vanessa found in the parking lot. I did not. I had promised myself I would not provoke her. Michael arrived several minutes later. He wore a charcoal suit and looked relieved when he saw me. Then his eyes dropped to the coat. He said nothing. That silence told me he had hoped I would change my mind. You made it, he said. I said I would. He kissed my cheek. Everything okay? I glanced at Vanessa, who was speaking to a woman near the stage. Perfectly. Michael followed my gaze. Mom. What nothing? He was going to wear that word out. We found our table near the front, not directly beside the stage, but close enough that I could see the podium clearly. Each place setting had a printed program, a small gift bag, and a name card. Mine read, Sadie Price. Vanessa's card was 2 seats away. Michael sat beside her. The chair to my right belonged to Eleanor Brooks. The name meant nothing to me then. The chair was still empty. Several other guests arrived. A bank executive, a woman who owned a chain of local pharmacies, a nonprofit consultant. I learned those details because Vanessa volunteered them in low tones to Michael whenever someone approached. That's Susan Langley, major donor. That's Patricia Green. She's close with the board chair. Then she leaned toward him and whispered, Eleanor Brooks is supposed to be at this table. Michael looked impressed. Really? I glanced toward the empty chair. Who is Eleanor Brooks? Vanessa looked at me. For the first time that morning, there was genuine surprise in her expression. You don't know, no. She's incredibly influential. That narrows it down. Michael gave me a warning glance. Vanessa continued. She served as CEO of Brooks Textile Group before retiring. Now she sits on several nonprofit boards. Something inside me stirred at the word textile, but not strongly enough to become recognition. Vanessa lowered her voice further. She's also on the executive selection committee for the position. Now I understood the tension. I looked at the empty chair again. So, she's interviewing you. Not today. Evaluating you. Vanessa's smile tightened. Everyone is always evaluating everyone at events like this. That sounded exhausting. Before I could respond, there was movement behind me. A woman's voice said, I'm so sorry. Traffic was worse than I expected. I stood automatically to let her reach the chair. She was in her early 70s, tall, elegant, silver hair cut neatly just below her ears, dark blue dress. No flashy jewelry except a small gold pin shaped like a leaf. Her face was composed in the way of someone accustomed to entering rooms where people knew who she was. Vanessa nearly jumped out of her seat. Mrs. Brooks. The woman smiled. Eleanor, please. I'm Vanessa Price. We met briefly at the workforce reception last month. Yes, of course. Vanessa introduced Michael. Then she gestured toward me. And this is Sadie. There it was again. Just Sadie. Eleanor turned toward me. Her eyes paused on my face. Not in recognition. Not yet. But longer than politeness required. I extended my hand. Nice to meet you. She took it. You too. Her hand was warm. Something about her voice brushed against the edge of my memory. I could not place it. She sat beside me. For several minutes everyone discussed the program. Vanessa was charming. Extremely charming. She asked Eleanor about a recent board initiative, mentioned an article Eleanor had written about workforce development, praised the foundation's expansion plans. I listened. Eleanor responded politely, but her attention seemed divided. Every so often I caught her looking at me. The first time I assumed I imagined it. The second time I smiled. She smiled back. The third time I finally asked, "Do I have something on my face?" Eleanor laughed softly. "No, I'm sorry, that's good. At my age you never know." She studied me again. "You just look familiar." My stomach tightened slightly. "I've lived in Richmond most of my life." "Did you work downtown for years? Were different places, department stores, bridal shops?" "Later I had an alterations business." Her expression shifted. "Alterations, yes." Before she could ask more, the lights dimmed. The program began. A foundation representative welcomed everyone. There was applause. A short video played on the large screen. Women spoke about finding jobs after divorce, escaping homelessness, rebuilding confidence. Their stories were moving. At least the parts that felt like theirs were. Then Vanessa's campaign appeared. Second chances. Her face filled the screen. I had already seen part of the video on Michael's phone, but watching it 20 feet tall was different. Around me, women nodded as Vanessa spoke. A person's circumstances should never determine the respect she receives. Applause. I felt my jaw tighten. Eleanor was watching the screen carefully. Then, without looking at me, she whispered, "That's true." I turned slightly. "Yes." She glanced at me. "Something about that phrase seems familiar too." I said nothing. The presentation ended. Lunch was served. For a while, conversation became easier. Eleanor asked me about my alterations business. I told her I had retired. She asked how long I had worked. "More than 40 years if you count the years I probably should have been charging people before I had sense enough to do it." She laughed. "That sounds familiar." Again there was that feeling, a memory trying to surface. Then Vanessa leaned across Michael. "Sadie, did you keep your coat with you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was cold." The ballroom air conditioning was stronger than expected. I slipped the coat around my shoulders. Eleanor glanced at it. "That's beautiful wool. Thank you." Vanessa gave a tiny smile. I knew that smile. It was the smile she used when she believed she knew something other people did not. "Sadie is very proud of that coat." "I like it," I said. "Tell Eleanor where you got it." Michael's eyes flicked toward Vanessa. Vanessa. What? She looked innocent. I'm complimenting her bargain. I should have ignored it. I could have. Instead, I answered, "St. Matthew's Thrift-Store." Eleanor's fork stopped. I noticed. Vanessa did not. $24, I added. Eleanor turned toward me fully. "St. Matthew's, yes. The church on Franklin. That's the one." Something changed in her face. Her eyes narrowed. Not suspiciously. Searching. Before she could speak, another woman at the table touched my sleeve. "You really found that at a thrift store?" "Yes. That's incredible." I smiled. "It needed some work." Vanessa laughed. "Of course it did." The woman looked at her. Vanessa continued. "Sadie loves rescuing things." The tone sounded playful. But I heard the edge. Michael heard it too. His shoulders stiffened. I ignored her and turned back to Eleanor. She was still staring at me. "Did you used to spend time at St. Matthew's?" she asked. "Yes. When years ago?" "How many years?" I thought about it. "Late 80s into the 90s. Her face changed again. I could almost see a door opening behind her eyes. Vanessa interrupted. "Well, Sadie has always been very committed to secondhand things." She gave a little laugh. Then, while adjusting the coat, I felt something against my wrist. A small paper tag. I looked down. Part of the original thrift store label had slipped from the inner pocket seam where I had tucked it instead of throwing it away. Vanessa saw it. Her eyes brightened. Oh my God. I pulled the tag free. She laughed. Actually laughed. Sadie, you still have the thrift store tag in there. Two women at the table smiled uncertainly. Michael said quietly, Vanessa, enough. But she was enjoying herself now. She leaned back and looked at my coat, then at the elegant ballroom, then at me. Sadie, you knew this was a donor luncheon, right? The table became quieter. I felt heat climb into my face. Vanessa continued smiling as though everything were harmless. You didn't have to dress like one of the people the charity serves. Silence. Absolute silence. Someone set down a fork. Michael stared at his plate. Then he leaned toward me and whispered, Mom, just ignore it. That was the moment. The sentence that finally made the humiliation complete. Not Vanessa's joke. My son's silence. I looked at him, then at her. I was about to answer when Eleanor Brooks suddenly turned toward me. Her expression was no longer polite. It was stunned. She studied my eyes, my mouth, my face. Then she leaned closer. Excuse me, she said. Her voice trembled slightly. Did you ever work at St. Matthew's Community Center? My heart began beating harder. Yes. Eleanor stared at me. Were you downstairs? I swallowed. Yes. Were you the woman who taught sewing there? The ballroom disappeared for 1 second. I saw fluorescent lights, a plastic grocery bag, a navy skirt with a crooked hem, a woman crying beside an old sewing machine. Eleanor's hand moved toward her chest. Oh my God, she whispered. Then she looked directly into my eyes. Sadie. And suddenly I remembered her. One of the people the charity serves. For a few seconds I could not hear anything except the blood rushing in my ears. The ballroom was still full of people. Silverware still moved against plates. Someone near the stage laughed. A server passed behind my chair carrying a tray of coffee cups. But at our table everything had stopped. Eleanor Brooks was staring at me as if 29 years had folded themselves into a single moment. Sadie, she said again. I looked at her more carefully. The silver hair was different. The tailored dress was different. The calm confidence was certainly different. But the eyes were the same. Dark, watchful eyes that had once looked at me across a folding table in a church basement while their owner fought tears over a broken zipper. Eleanor, I whispered. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, my lord. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Michael finally lifted his head from his plate. Eleanor reached for my hand. You remember me, I do now. She laughed softly, though her eyes had already filled with tears. I can't believe this. Neither could I. The last time I had seen Eleanor Brooks, she had been wearing a navy skirt, she had altered herself, and carrying a lunch bag to an entry-level office job. Now she sat beside me with the posture of a woman everyone else at the table seemed eager to impress. Vanessa looked from Eleanor to me. You two know each other? Eleanor turned toward her. Oh, yes. There was something in the way she said it that made Vanessa straighten in her chair. Michael stared at me. Mom, I still had not found my voice completely. Eleanor squeezed my hand. St. Matthew's, she said. Downstairs, Tuesday and Thursday nights. I nodded. Second stitch. Her face broke into a smile. That was it. The words seemed to land heavily on the table. Second stitch. The name was close enough to Vanessa's Second Chances campaign that even the other guests seemed to notice. Vanessa certainly did. I saw the flicker in her eyes. Recognition, calculation, concern. She recovered quickly. That's amazing, she said. What a coincidence. Eleanor looked at her. I don't think I would call it a coincidence. The woman seated across from us leaned forward. Were you part of Sadie's sewing program? Eleanor gave a small laugh. Part of it. I practically lived there for 6 months. I felt heat rise into my face. Eleanor, you're making it sound more dramatic than it was. She turned toward me. No, I'm not. I knew that tone. It was the same stubbornness she had shown when learning to hem a skirt and refusing to admit she needed help ripping out crooked stitches. Vanessa tried to steer the conversation. So Sadie taught sewing. Eleanor stared at her as if the question were too small. She taught a lot more than sewing. Michael shifted beside Vanessa. I glanced at him. He looked confused. That hurt in a different way. Not because he had done anything in that moment. Because he was hearing pieces of my life as though they belonged to a stranger. Eleanor continued. When I met Sadie, I was 43 years old and convinced my life was over. The table became still again. I touched her hand. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice was gentle. But only what I'm comfortable sharing. I nodded. That mattered. Even after all these years, it mattered. Eleanor looked around the table. My husband left me after 21 years of marriage. He had already moved money out of our joint accounts. I had 2 teenage daughters and very little work history. The woman across from us frowned sympathetically. I'm sorry. Eleanor smiled. It was a long time ago. Then she looked at me. But I remember exactly how it felt. I remembered too. Her wet coat dripping near the basement door. The plastic grocery bag containing nearly everything she believed could be turned into interview clothes. The way she kept apologizing. For taking space. For not understanding sewing. For crying. For needing anything at all. Eleanor continued. I heard St. Matthew's had some employment support. I went there because I didn't know where else to go, she laughed softly. I thought I was going to learn how to mend clothes so I could save money. You did, I said. Eventually. That drew a few smiles. Then Eleanor pointed toward me. This woman would not let me say I was useless. I looked down at my plate. Because you weren't. I didn't believe that then. You learned. No. She shook her head. You insisted until I learned. Vanessa had gone very quiet. The same daughter-in-law who less than 2 minutes earlier had joked that I was dressed like one of the people the charity serves was now watching one of the most influential women in the room describe herself as having once been exactly that. I could have enjoyed the irony. Part of me did. I would be lying if I said otherwise. But mostly I felt sad. Sad because Eleanor's dignity should never have been ammunition against Vanessa. Sad because the women our foundation claimed to serve had apparently become a category in Vanessa's mind rather than individuals. Sad because Michael had heard the insult and chosen silence. Eleanor glanced at the camel coat around my shoulders. Did you fix that yourself? Yes. I knew it. Vanessa attempted a smile. I told you Sadie likes rescuing things. Eleanor's expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. She looked directly at Vanessa. There are worse habits. Vanessa swallowed. Of course. The woman across from us said, I'm still amazed you found that coat for $24. Before I could answer, Vanessa laughed nervously. Well, that part is very Sadie. I looked at her. There was desperation underneath the lightness now. She wanted the table to return to normal. She wanted her joke to disappear. She wanted Eleanor's recognition of me to become a charming anecdote instead of what it really was, a mirror held up at exactly the wrong moment. I decided not to help her. But I also decided not to attack. There's nothing shameful about buying something secondhand, I said. My voice was calm. Or needing to. Vanessa's face tightened. I know that. I held her gaze. Do you? Michael whispered, Mom. I turned toward him. What? He looked at me, then at Vanessa. For once he had no instruction ready, no request for peace, no warning not to make a scene. Maybe he finally understood that the scene had already been made. Just not by me. Eleanor leaned back slightly. I think Sadie is right. Vanessa nodded too quickly. Of course she is. I was just teasing. Eleanor's eyes stayed on her. About what the question was so simple that it left Vanessa nowhere to go. She forced a laugh. The coat. What about it? Vanessa's cheeks reddened. That it came from a thrift store. Eleanor looked at the coat again, then at her own tailored sleeve. I have donated clothes to thrift stores for 40 years. Vanessa opened her mouth. Eleanor continued. I assume somebody buys them. A woman at the table smiled. Vanessa did not. Eleanor folded her hands. And I'm grateful they do. Silence. Then she added, there was a time when most of what my daughters and I wore came from church donations. That finished it. Vanessa's face changed completely. Not because Eleanor had raised her voice. She had not. Not because anyone insulted her. No one had. But because the woman whose approval she desperately wanted had just placed herself inside the group Vanessa had casually used as a punchline. One of the people the charity serves. I could practically hear the sentence echoing. Michael finally spoke. Vanessa shouldn't have said that. She turned sharply toward him. Michael. No. His voice was low, but for once it was firm. You shouldn't have. I watched my son carefully. The apology was not for me. Not yet. But it was the first time he had contradicted her in public since I could remember. Vanessa looked humiliated, and something strange happened. Shouldn't have. I watched my son carefully. The apology was not for me. Not yet. But it was the first time he had contradicted her in public since I could remember. Vanessa looked humiliated, and something strange happened inside me. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. I had not wanted my son to defend me only after someone important validated my worth. I had wanted him to defend me when it was just his mother wearing a cheap coat. Eleanor must have sensed the shift in me. She touched my wrist. Are you all right? Yes. It was not entirely true, but it was close enough for the moment. The program on stage resumed. A speaker began talking about employment barriers facing women over 50. Our table returned to polite attention, at least outwardly, but underneath the atmosphere had changed. Eleanor occasionally glanced at me with a kind of astonished affection. Michael looked distracted. Vanessa barely touched her lunch. I sat quietly listening. During the speech, I found myself remembering Eleanor's first weeks at Second Stitch. She had been determined to learn quickly because she needed work. But what she needed more than sewing was permission to stop apologizing for needing help. I remembered telling her once everyone needs help at some point. The important thing is not to confuse a difficult season with your identity. At the time, I had been speaking to one frightened woman in a basement. Now I wondered how many people in that ballroom truly believed the same thing. When the speaker finished, applause filled the room. Eleanor leaned toward me. Do you remember the navy skirt? I laughed despite myself. The one with the backward zipper. She covered her face for a second. You remember that? How could I forget? I thought you were going to throw me out. I thought about it. She laughed louder. Several people turned toward us. For the first time that afternoon, I relaxed. Then Eleanor said quietly, that job changed everything. What job? The textile company. I nodded. I remember you got an office position. I stayed there 22 years. I blinked. You're kidding. No. Her smile softened. I started answering phones. She glanced around the ballroom. Then I kept moving. I had known from Vanessa that Eleanor had become the CEO of a textile company. But hearing the bridge between the frightened woman I remembered and the powerful woman beside me made my chest tighten. I'm proud of you, I said. Eleanor's eyes filled again. You were proud of me before there was anything impressive to be proud of. That sentence almost broke me. I looked away. At the stage. At the flowers. Anywhere but her face. She lowered her voice. Sadie, do you know how many times I repeated something you told me? I shook my head. You said I wasn't useless. I was scared. Those were different things. I closed my eyes briefly. I had forgotten saying it. She had not. Eleanor continued. I told my daughters that. I told women I hired that. I told myself that more times than I can count. Across the table, Vanessa was listening. So was Michael. And suddenly, I became aware of something uncomfortable. Some of the phrases Vanessa had used in her campaign had not merely come from typed papers. They had lived in people. In Eleanor. In me. In women who had built new lives around them. Eleanor turned toward Vanessa. You work on the Second Chances initiative, correct? Vanessa sat straighter. Yes. You developed it. I led the campaign development. Eleanor nodded slowly. I thought some of the language sounded familiar. Vanessa went pale. Michael looked at me. I did not move. Eleanor was not accusing her. Not yet. She was simply noticing. But Vanessa knew exactly what she was noticing. She reached for her water glass. Well, ideas about dignity and workforce development tend to overlap. Certainly, Eleanor said. Her tone remained pleasant. Then she turned back to me. Sadie, do you still have the old second stitch materials? Before I could answer, Michael spoke. I think we do. I looked at him. He seemed to realize immediately that he had said too much. Eleanor's eyebrows lifted. We... The word hung over the table. Vanessa's hand tightened around her glass. Michael swallowed. And for the first time that afternoon, the humiliation over my coat no longer felt like the most important thing that had happened. Because Eleanor had just asked a simple question, and the answer was sitting in Vanessa's house. The woman I remembered crying over a sewing machine. For several seconds after Michael said, I think we do, no one at the table moved. Eleanor looked at him first, then Vanessa, then me. What exactly do you have? She asked. Michael cleared his throat. Some old papers from Mom's program. Newsletters, notes, things like that. Vanessa cut in quickly. They were family materials. We came across them when Sadie was cleaning out her attic. The way she said family materials bothered me. It made private letters sound like leftover Christmas decorations. Eleanor's expression remained polite. Were they from Second Stitch? Michael nodded. I believe so. I could feel Vanessa watching him. Not angrily, carefully, as if every word he spoke might cost her something. Eleanor turned toward me. You kept all that, most of it. I'm glad. I'm not sure I am. She understood immediately. Her smile faded. Before she could ask another question, the woman on stage announced a short intermission before dessert and the final presentation. Chairs scraped back. People stood. Vanessa rose almost instantly. I need to check something with the event team. She touched Michael's shoulder. Come with me. Michael glanced at me, then at Eleanor. I'll be back. I said nothing. They walked away together. I watched them disappear through the crowd. Eleanor waited until they were gone. Then she asked softly, Did I step into something? I laughed once. That depends on how you define something. She turned her chair slightly toward me. Sadie. There was no pressure in her voice, only concern. I looked down at my hands. My daughter-in-law used some of the old second stitch materials for this campaign. Eleanor's expression changed. Use them how? I'm still trying to understand that myself. Did you give permission? No. She sat back. Oh, that single syllable sounded very different from Michael's reaction to my coat. No judgment, just understanding. I added quickly, I don't want this to become gossip. It won't. I mean it. So do I. She touched the edge of her napkin. Did she know what those materials were? Yes. Did your son? He knew enough to know they belonged to me. Eleanor was quiet. I could tell she was angry. Not the loud kind. The kind that becomes very still. I said, please don't do anything because of me. She looked at me. I'm not sure this is only about... That sentence stayed with me. Before I could respond, someone approached the table. A tall woman in a dark green dress smiled at Eleanor. I've been trying to find you. Eleanor stood and hugged her. They spoke briefly about a board meeting. I expected Eleanor to leave with her. Instead, she said, Give me 5 minutes. The woman nodded and walked away. I smiled. People still wait for you now? Eleanor laughed. You say that like it surprises you. It does. Her expression softened. Then maybe I should tell you what happened. I looked at her. After St. Matthew's, yes. I settled back into my chair. I'd like that. She took a slow breath. You remember the textile distributor, the office job? I started answering phones. You were terrified. I was. You called me 3 times your first week. 4. I smiled. You're right. 4. She laughed. The 4th time I was hiding in the ladies' room because my supervisor asked me to prepare an invoice, and I didn't know what half the numbers meant. I told you to ask. You told me questions are cheaper than mistakes. I had forgotten that too. Eleanor shook her head. You said things like that constantly. I probably stole them from Frank. I don't care where they came from. They kept me employed. Her smile faded into something more reflective. I learned fast. I had to. My daughters were depending on me. She told me how she moved from receptionist to billing assistant, then into customer accounts. The company distributed fabrics and industrial textiles across Virginia and North Carolina. Eleanor learned inventory, shipping, purchasing, eventually sales. I discovered I was good with people, she said. I already knew that. No, you knew I could become good with people. There's a difference. There was then. After 6 years, she became office manager. After 11 regional operations manager. The original owner sold the company to a larger group, and Eleanor stayed through the transition. By the time she was 60, she was running a major division. Eventually, she became chief executive of Brooks Textile Group after participating in a management buyout with 2 partners. I stared at her. You bought part of the company, a small part at first. That woman with the backward zipper bought a textile company. She laughed so loudly that a man at the next table turned around. Yes. I'm sorry, but that's funny. It was funny to me too. She wiped the corner of one eye. Then her expression grew serious. When I first became an executive, I kept waiting for someone to discover I didn't belong there. I understood that feeling. And did they number good? Because eventually I realized everyone in those rooms had something they were pretending not to be afraid of. I nodded. That sounds about right. She looked across the ballroom. That was why I started funding workforce programs. Now I understood. Not as a donor seeking recognition. As a woman who had once needed exactly that kind of help. I wanted programs that didn't make women feel like charity cases, she continued. I wanted practical training, skills, confidence, connections. Second stitch. Exactly. She looked at me. You built the model before any of us knew to call it one. I shook my head. Eleanor, please. No. Her voice became firmer. Sadie, you always did this. Did what made what you did sound ordinary. It was ordinary. No. She leaned closer. You know what ordinary would have been? I waited. Ordinary would have been fixing my blouse and going home. I looked away. She continued. You stayed. That doesn't make me special. You came back the next week. People needed help. You convinced Frank to repair machines. I did not convince Frank of anything. He volunteered himself. That made her smile. Fine. He volunteered himself. She paused. But you created a place where women could walk into a basement ashamed and walk out believing they might still have a future. My throat tightened. Not everyone did. No program saves everyone. I never liked that word. What word save? She studied me. I continued. Those women saved themselves. Eleanor nodded slowly. That is exactly why Second Stitch worked. Across the ballroom, I saw Michael and Vanessa speaking near one of the side doors. Vanessa's arms were folded. Michael looked defensive. They were clearly arguing. I turned away. Eleanor noticed. She's your daughter-in-law. Yes. And Michael is your son. Yes. She frowned. I remember a little boy. I laughed. That was him. The one who used to sit in the corner with baseball cards, that was definitely him. He once asked me if sewing was only for old ladies. I covered my mouth. I'd forgotten that. I told him I was 43. What did he say? That sounded old to him. We both laughed. For a moment, the tension at the table disappeared. Then Eleanor said, He didn't know what was happening there, did he? No. Why not? Because he was 6. That isn't what I meant. I knew. I looked at the stage. Frank and I didn't want him to know how close things got. With money, yes. Eleanor nodded. You protected him. I thought I did. And now I watched Michael from across the room. He had his father's shoulders, his father's hands. But lately I had struggled to recognize some of his choices. Now I'm not sure. Eleanor did not offer easy reassurance. That was one thing I appreciated immediately. She simply said children rarely understand the cost of the childhood their parents built. I looked at her. That sounds like experience. My daughters found out later how bad things were after their father left. How did they react? One cried. One got angry, at you, at him, then at me for hiding it. She smiled faintly. Eventually, they understood. I hoped Michael would too. A server placed dessert plates around the table, chocolate mousse with raspberries. Neither Eleanor nor I touched ours. She looked at my coat again. You know that thing is becoming quite symbolic. I smiled. It is a coat. It is a $24 coat that Vanessa insulted at a charity luncheon while wearing a foundation badge about dignity. I sighed. When you say it like that, it does sound unfortunate. Sadie. Yes. Why didn't you answer her more sharply? I considered the question. Because I didn't want to become what she had just accused me of being. Eleanor frowned. What do you mean, someone desperate to prove I belonged? She watched me. I belong whether Vanessa believes it or not. A small smile appeared on Eleanor's face. There you are. We're the woman I remember. I laughed softly. She reached for her water glass. I remember another thing too. What? The first week I came to Second Stitch, I told you I didn't want charity. Yes. You asked whether I had ever helped anyone else. I remember. I said of course. And I told you receiving help did not turn you into a different species of human being. Eleanor pointed at me. Exactly. I smiled. That sounds more like me. She looked toward Vanessa across the room. Some people enjoy helping as long as there is distance between themselves and the person receiving it. I said nothing. Real compassion becomes uncomfortable when the person needing help reminds you that the difference between your life and theirs might only be one bad year. That landed harder than I expected, because Frank and I had been one bad year away from a very different life. Eleanor had been one husband's decision away from eviction. Vanessa seemed to think hardship belonged to a separate class of people, people the charity serves. Not people like her, not people sitting beside her, not family. The final program began before we could continue. A foundation board member stepped to the podium and thanked donors. Then she highlighted several campaign leaders. Vanessa's name was mentioned. Applause followed. I watched my daughter-in-law return to the table wearing her professional smile. She sat beside Michael. Neither looked at me. Eleanor applauded politely. Then the speaker said, "Our Second Chances initiative has reminded us that dignity is not something an organization gives. It is something every woman already possesses." Eleanor turned slowly toward me. I did not need to ask why. The sentence sounded familiar. Too familiar. After the applause, Vanessa reached for her water. Eleanor leaned across me slightly. "Vanessa." She looked up. "Yes, that phrase." Vanessa froze. "Which phrase about dignity not being something we give?" Vanessa forced a smile. "It's one of the campaign principles." Eleanor nodded. "I heard Sadie say almost exactly that 29 years ago." Michael closed his eyes. Vanessa's face lost color. I felt no satisfaction, only certainty. The coat had opened the door. Eleanor had walked through it. And now the past was sitting at our table asking questions Vanessa could no longer dismiss as a misunderstanding. The story, Vanessa borrowed. The luncheon ended at 3:30, but I did not leave the Jefferson Hotel until almost 5. By then the ballroom had mostly emptied. The flower arrangements were being dismantled. Staff members cleared glasses from tables. Volunteers gathered programs and folded signage, while a few lingering donors continued conversations near the doors. Vanessa disappeared almost immediately after the final applause. Michael stayed long enough to ask whether I needed a ride home. "No," I said. "Mom, maybe we should talk." "We should." He looked relieved. "Tonight? Not tonight." His expression tightened. "Why?" "Because I'm tired, Michael. And because if we talk now, you'll spend half the conversation explaining Vanessa instead of listening to me. That's not fair." I looked at him. He sighed. "Okay." For once he did not argue further. Eleanor had remained nearby speaking with 2 foundation board members. When they finally walked away, she came back to me. "Do you have a few minutes?" "I do." "Coffee." I almost laughed. After that lunch, I think I deserve something stronger. She smiled. "So do I. But coffee first." We found a quiet seating area near one of the hotel lounges. The contrast was strange. An hour earlier, Vanessa had been surrounded by cameras, speeches, and applause. Now Eleanor and I sat beneath a brass lamp with 2 cups of coffee between us, trying to understand where my past had entered my daughter-in-law's career. Eleanor took a folded program from her handbag. She opened it to the page describing the Second Chances initiative. You should read this. I already know enough. I'm not sure you do. That was not reassuring. I took the program. The first paragraph described the campaign's goal, helping women rebuild economic independence after major personal setbacks. Nothing wrong there. The second paragraph focused on practical skills, employment readiness, financial confidence, community support. Again, nothing unusual. Then I reached the third paragraph. A sentence stopped me. A woman in crisis does not arrive empty-handed. She arrives carrying skills she may have forgotten how to value. I read it twice, then a third time. Eleanor watched my face. You recognize it? Yes. What was the original? I did not need to think. Women don't arrive here empty. They arrive carrying things nobody bothered to call skills. Eleanor nodded. I remember. My fingers tightened around the paper. Below that was another line. The strongest support does not create dependence. It reminds a woman what she can still do for herself. My stomach turned. I closed the program. That was in my notes. Exactly close enough. Eleanor leaned back. I thought so. I looked at her. How much of this did you recognize more than I expected? She hesitated. And I wasn't the only one. What does that mean? 2 board members worked with programs that inherited pieces of the old St. Matthew's model. They didn't know where the language originated, but some of the philosophy felt familiar. I looked down. You make it sound like I invented something. You helped build something. That's different. Not as different as you want it to be. I did not answer. Eleanor took a slow breath. Sadie, I need to ask you directly. Did Vanessa have permission to use any of your materials? No. Did she ever interview you? No. Ask you about Second Stitch? Not seriously. Eleanor frowned. What does not seriously mean? She asked questions at family dinners. Things like how many women came through the program, what kinds of problems they had, whether anyone ever became successful. Successful. Yes. Eleanor's mouth tightened. Did she ask about me? I don't remember. She knew your materials existed, apparently. And Michael gave her the box. I nodded. I think he believed they were just old papers. Eleanor was quiet. That was painful in its own way. Just old papers. 29 years of people's lives reduced to storage. I said I don't think Michael understood what he was giving her. That may be true, but Vanessa did. Eleanor did not disagree. We sat in silence. Then she asked, Do you know whether there were personal letters in that box? I'm afraid there were. Her expression changed. Mine, I don't know. You kept one. I looked up. One, what, a letter from me. I searched my memory. Then it came back. A handwritten note on pale stationery. Eleanor had written it after receiving her first promotion. She thanked Frank for repairing the machines and thanked me for refusing to let her describe herself as useless. I remember, I said. I wrote about my daughters. Yes. And my husband. A little. She looked away. That was private. I know. The anger in her voice frightened me more than if she had shouted. I'm sorry. You didn't do anything. I kept it. You kept something I gave you. That's true. And your daughter-in-law may have used it. I could not answer. Eleanor reached across the table. Sadie, I am not blaming you. I know. But I still felt responsible. I had stored those papers because they mattered. I had failed to protect them because I never imagined someone in my family would see them as material. Eleanor looked toward the windows. Do you know what worries me most? What Vanessa's campaign included anonymous profiles. My chest tightened. What profiles? Short stories used in donor presentations. Women facing hardship. I stared at her. She told the board they were composites. Of real people, she said they were inspired by real experiences, but altered for privacy. I felt suddenly cold. What kind of experiences? Eleanor hesitated. Then she reached for her phone. I can show you one. I'm not sure I want to see it. I think you need to. She opened the foundation website and scrolled, then handed me the phone. The profile was titled, When pride becomes a prison. I hated it immediately. The anonymous woman was described as an older seamstress who had spent years hiding financial struggle from her child. My breath caught. I kept reading. The story said the woman was too proud to admit she depended on thrift store clothing and confused self-denial with dignity. I stopped. The hotel seemed to tilt slightly around me. Sadie, I handed the phone back. That's me. Eleanor's face hardened. Are you certain she changed details? What details? My age, the number of children, how long the hardship lasted, but the rest, my work. Frank's construction business. The second-hand clothes. Hiding financial stress from Michael. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. She made me sound ashamed. Were you? No. The answer came instantly. We were frightened, sometimes exhausted, sometimes embarrassed that we couldn't afford things we once could. But thrift stores weren't the shame. I looked toward the ballroom doors. Vanessa turned the wrong thing into the lesson. Eleanor's voice softened. Because she didn't understand the story. No. I shook my head. Because she understood only the part that fit her version. That realization hurt more than the copied sentences. Vanessa had not simply borrowed language. She had borrowed my life and rewritten my values. In her version, I was a woman trapped by pride until charity taught me dignity. In reality, I had found dignity while money was scarce and spent years helping other women remember theirs. The difference mattered. A great deal. Eleanor sat quietly while I processed it. After a while, she said, "The foundation needs to know." I looked at her sharply. No. Sadie. I don't want to destroy her. This isn't about destroying anyone. It will feel that way to Michael. Then Michael may need to feel uncomfortable. I sighed. You didn't see him growing up. No, I did. He is a 41-year-old man now. I know that. Do you? Her question irritated me. Because it was fair. I rubbed my forehead. I don't want his marriage damaged because of me. Eleanor leaned forward. If telling the truth damages a marriage, the truth did not create the weakness. I looked at her. Where did you learn to say things like that? She smiled sadly. Some seamstress in a basement. Despite everything, I laughed. Then my phone vibrated. Michael. I ignored it. A second message appeared. Please call me before you talk to anyone from the foundation. My stomach tightened. Eleanor noticed my expression. Michael. Yes. Does he know about the profile? I doubt it. Another message came. Vanessa is very upset. I stared at those words. Vanessa is very upset. Nothing about whether I was upset. Nothing about the material. Nothing about the woman sitting across from me who might have had her private letter used. The old pattern. Protect Vanessa first. I placed the phone face down. Eleanor said, You don't have to decide anything tonight. I already decided something. What if someone from the foundation asks me a direct question I will answer honestly? She nodded. That's enough. But I won't campaign against Vanessa. I understand. I won't call reporters. No one asked you to. I won't publicly humiliate her. Eleanor's expression softened. Sadie, nobody who actually knows you thinks you would. That almost made me cry. Not because it was kind, because my own son had seemed less certain. We finished our coffee. Before leaving, Eleanor asked if I would walk with her to the hotel entrance. As we crossed the lobby, several people greeted her. She stopped each time, introduced me each time. This is my old friend Sadie Price. Old friend, not donor, not volunteer, not someone important, friend. At the revolving doors, she turned to me. There's something else you should know. What the executive position Vanessa wants isn't simply public relations. I know. She would have access to participant stories, case histories, donor messaging, and community partnerships. I understood immediately. This was no longer about whether Vanessa had copied a slogan. It was about trust. Eleanor continued. If the board believes she used private stories without proper permission, they have to review it. Even if I don't complain, yes. Because of what happened today, because several of us heard enough to ask questions. I looked down at the old leather handbag Vanessa hated. So this has already started. Yes. I exhaled. What happens now, I don't know. She reached for my hand. And neither do you. Outside, a car horn sounded. Eleanor's driver had arrived. Before she left, she said, "Whatever happens, don't let anyone convince you that honesty is revenge." Then she was gone. I stood beneath the hotel awning alone. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Michael. His voice was tense. "Mom, where are you outside the hotel? Did you talk to Eleanor?" "Yes." He exhaled sharply. "What did you tell her the truth?" There was silence. Then he said, "Vanessa thinks Eleanor is going to report this to the board. She probably is. Mom, this could cost Vanessa the position." "I know. You could explain that the materials were family documents. They weren't. You could say there was a misunderstanding. There wasn't." "Mom, no." My voice surprised even me. Firm, clear. "I am not going to lie so your wife can keep a job opportunity built partly on things she took without asking." He said nothing. I continued. "And before you defend her again, you should look at the foundation website. Why, there's a profile called When Pride Becomes a Prison." Another silence. "What about it?" "It's about me. What she rewrote our hardest years into a story about a woman ashamed of thrift store clothes. That doesn't make sense." "No, Michael, it doesn't." His breathing changed. For the first time, he sounded less defensive, more uncertain. "I didn't know about that." "I believe you. Are you sure it's you? I know my own life." He went quiet. Then I said the thing I had been trying not to say all day. "The coat isn't the problem anymore. I know." "No, I don't think you do." I looked back through the hotel doors toward the ballroom where Vanessa had spent the afternoon presenting herself as a voice for women whose dignity was supposed to matter. "The problem is that your wife borrowed my words, my work, and my past." I swallowed. "And somehow after using all of it, she still learned nothing from me." Michael did not answer. This time I ended the call. When I got home, the camel coat was still around my shoulders. I stood in the hallway and looked at myself in the mirror. $24, a repaired lining, 4 replacement buttons. That morning, I had thought the coat might reveal whether Vanessa could recognize value without knowing the price. By evening, I understood the real test had been much larger. Vanessa knew exactly how valuable my story was. She just had not believed the woman who lived it deserved the same respect. And now the foundation was beginning to notice the difference. She asked me to save her. Vanessa came to my house on Monday morning at 9:30. She did not call first. That was how I knew something had changed. Normally, Vanessa treated my house like a place requiring advance notice. She texted before visiting, checked whether I would be home, and rarely stayed longer than necessary. That morning, she knocked 3 times and stood on my porch with both hands wrapped tightly around the strap of her handbag. When I opened the door, I barely recognized the woman from the luncheon. Her hair was pulled back instead of carefully styled. There was no foundation pin on her coat, no polished smile. She looked tired. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "Yes." She walked into the living room and remained standing. I closed the door. "Coffee, number tea?" "No, thank you." I waited. Vanessa looked around the room as if she had never seen it before. Her eyes passed over the old side table she once suggested I have professionally refinished. The curtains she thought were outdated. The floral coffee cups behind the glass cabinet. For once, she did not comment on anything. Finally, she said, "The foundation postponed the appointment." I sat down. "What appointment?" "The executive position." "I thought interviews were still happening. They were supposed to announce the final decision this week." She swallowed. "Now they're reviewing the campaign." I said nothing. She looked at me. Eleanor raised concerns. "She told me the board would have questions." "So you knew?" "I knew there would be a review." Her eyes narrowed. "And you were fine with that?" "That I don't know what you want me to say, Vanessa. I want you to understand what this could do to me." That answer told me immediately why she had come. Not to apologize. Not yet. She wanted help. I folded my hands in my lap. "Sit down." She hesitated, then took the chair across from me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "They think I used material without permission." "Did you?" Her jaw tightened. It's more complicated than that. Usually when people say that they mean the simple answer sounds bad. Her eyes flashed. This is exactly what I was afraid of. What you've already decided I'm guilty. No. I kept my voice calm. I've decided I didn't give you permission. That doesn't mean I stole anything. What would you call it, adaptation? I almost smiled. Michael, you'll use that word too, because that's what it was. She leaned forward. Sadie, those papers were almost 30 years old. They were sitting in boxes in your attic. That did not make them yours. They were in family storage. My attic is not family storage. She exhaled. Michael brought the box home. By mistake. He thought you wanted him to take it. He was wrong. I didn't know that. You knew the papers were mine. She looked away. That was answer enough. I continued. You knew the stories came from women I worked with. Yes. You knew some were personal. They were historical. I stared at her. Historical, yes. She heard herself and immediately tried to soften it. I mean, they were from decades ago. Women don't stop owning their experiences because enough years pass. I changed names. You used details. Composite details. You used mine. She closed her eyes briefly. I should have handled that differently. It was the first thing she had said that resembled responsibility. I waited. She opened her eyes. The profile wasn't meant to be literally you. It described a seamstress whose husband's construction work collapsed, who hid financial struggle from her child, and bought second-hand clothes. I changed the age. That must have taken tremendous creativity. She looked at me sharply. I had not meant to sound cruel, but I was angry. Still. More deeply than I had allowed myself to admit. Vanessa took a breath. The point of that profile was that pride can stop people from asking for help. That wasn't my story. I know that now. You knew enough to use it. I interpreted it. You rewrote it. Her voice rose. Because stories have to communicate something. They already communicated something. What? That hardship does not make people less worthy. She stared at me. That is what my campaign says. No. I shook my head. Your campaign says that very beautifully. She went still. I continued. But your behavior says something else. I did not need to mention the coat. Her face told me she knew exactly what I meant. She looked down at her hands. For the first time since entering the house, she seemed ashamed. Not embarrassed. Ashamed. There was a difference. I shouldn't have said that at the luncheon. No. It was a joke. I know. I was nervous. I know. I felt like everything depended on that room. I know. Her eyes lifted. Then why are you making this harder? There it was, the real question. Why would I not rescue her if I understood how frightened she was? I leaned back. I'm not making it harder. You could make it easier. How she reached into her handbag. That was when I knew the reason for the visit had been planned before she ever arrived. She removed a white envelope, then a single sheet of paper. My stomach tightened. What is that A statement? For what she unfolded it. It clarifies that the materials came from family archives and that you were aware they might be used for non-profit educational purposes. I stared at her. I wasn't aware. Her voice softened. It doesn't say you personally approved every sentence. It says enough. Sadie, no. You haven't read it. I heard what you said. It could resolve this. For you, for everyone. I laughed once. No, not for Eleanor. Vanessa's face tightened. Eleanor is not named anywhere. That does not matter. The board isn't accusing me of exposing anyone. Not yet. She looked frightened at that. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She leaned toward me. If you sign this, they'll understand there wasn't malicious intent. I never said you were malicious. That's how they're treating it. They're asking whether you had permission. I believed I did. Then you believed something convenient. Her eyes filled with tears. I had never seen Vanessa cry before. Not once in the 15 years I had known her. She blinked quickly, angry at the tears themselves. I have worked for years for an opportunity like this. I know. You think I don't deserve it. I didn't say that. You don't have to. I think the foundation should decide based on the truth. She stood. The truth is that I created the campaign with material you did not create. I wrote everything. After reading my words, I developed the concept using my program. I built the strategy using women's lives. Her voice cracked. Why do you have to say it like that? Because that is what happened. At that moment, the front door opened. Michael. I turned sharply. He stopped in the hallway. Mom, did you give him a key? Vanessa asked. He has had one since he was 19. Michael looked from Vanessa to the paper in her hand. You showed her, yes. I stared at my son. You knew about this. He walked into the room. We talked about it last night. So both of you decided I should sign something before speaking to me. That's not fair. Michael, I am getting tired of hearing that phrase. He sat beside Vanessa. Mom just read it. No, please. No. His face tightened. This could cost her the job. She does not have the job. You know what I mean. Yes, I do. I looked at Vanessa. She wants me to say she had permission when she didn't. Michael shook his head. That's not exactly what the statement says. Then what does it say? That the materials were part of family records and that their use was understood. By whom? Silence. Not by me. Michael looked frustrated. Mom, no one is asking you to lie. Yes, you are. No. If I sign a sentence designed to make people believe I approved something I did not approve, what would you call that? He looked away. Vanessa whispered, a clarification. I stared at her. Then something inside me settled. Not anger. Decision. I stood. I am not signing it. Vanessa's face drained of color. Sadie. No. She stood too. You're really going to let this happen? Let what happen? My career fall apart over some old papers, Michael said Vanessa. But I held up one hand. No, let her finish. Vanessa's breathing was uneven now. You know I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Intent matters. Then why isn't it enough because consequences matter too? She shook her head. I can fix this. I hope you do. Then help me. I am helping you. Her face twisted. By refusing, yes. She stared at me. I continued quietly. If I lie for you now, you learn that consequences disappear when the right person protects you. That is not what this is. It is exactly what this is. Michael stood. Mom, she could lose years of progress. I turned toward him. There it was again. His wife's career, her progress, her opportunity. I thought of Frank, his name being used in a profile he never approved. Our hardest year being polished into someone else's campaign material. I asked, if someone had done this to your father, would you ask him to sign that paper? Michael froze. What if someone had taken his construction records, his letters, his worst financial year, and turned them into a story to advance a career? Would you ask him to lie so they wouldn't face consequences? That's different. Why? Because Dad. He stopped. I waited. Because Dad. What? Michael looked at the floor. He had no answer. I stepped closer to him. You keep saying this is different whenever the truth becomes uncomfortable. He looked up. I'm trying to protect my wife. I understand. You'd do the same for Dad. No. He stared at me. I shook my head. I would protect Frank from cruelty. I would protect him from lies. I would stand beside him while he faced something painful. I glanced at the statement. But I would not turn something false into something true, because I loved him. Michael's face softened slightly. Vanessa sat down again. She looked exhausted. I felt my anger begin to cool. That did not mean my answer changed. I sat across from her. Listen to me carefully. She raised her eyes. I am not calling your employer. She said nothing. I am not contacting reporters. Her shoulders lowered slightly. I am not telling people at the foundation they should fire you. She blinked. And I will not spend my days trying to punish you. Then what are you going to do? Nothing. She frowned. I continued. Unless someone asks me a question. Her eyes closed. And if they do, I will tell the truth, even if it costs me the position. Yes. Her eyes opened. That feels like revenge. No, Vanessa. My voice was quieter now. Revenge would be trying to hurt you. I gestured toward the paper. This is me refusing to hurt myself to save you. No one spoke. The words settled over the room. Michael looked at me differently. I could not tell whether he understood yet. Vanessa folded the statement slowly. Her hands were trembling. I almost reached for them. Almost. Instead, I let her feel the discomfort. Not because I enjoyed it, because discomfort sometimes carried lessons reassurance could not. She put the paper back into her handbag. Then she stood. I should go. Michael rose with her. At the door, Vanessa turned. Her face looked smaller somehow, less polished, more human. I really did believe in the campaign. I believe you. That surprised her. I continued. But believing in a message and living by it are different things. She looked away. Then she left. Michael remained in the hallway. For a second I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, "You're being very hard on her." I looked at my son. "And you're still asking the wrong question." What question should I be asking? I felt something painful rise in my chest. You should be asking why your wife needed my lie more than she needed my forgiveness. He stared at me. I opened the door. Go home, Michael. He hesitated. Then he left. I closed the door behind him. For the first time since the luncheon, the house was completely silent. I walked into the living room and sat down where Vanessa had been. On the table was a small damp mark from the water glass I had given her. I wiped it away with my thumb. Then I thought about all the years I had fixed things. Torn linings, broken zippers, crooked seams, stakes. I had spent most of my life believing nearly anything could be repaired if someone was willing to do the work. But there was one thing I had finally learned not to repair for other people. Consequences. Vanessa had asked me to save her. I had said no. Not because I wanted to see her fall. Because for the first time I understood that saving her from the truth might be the cruelest thing I could do. What my son finally heard. Michael did not call me for 2 days. That was unusual. Even after arguments, he usually sent something. A photograph of dinner, a short message about work, a link to an article he thought I would like. Nothing important enough to be called an apology, but enough to pretend the silence between us had not become dangerous. This time there was nothing. By Wednesday afternoon, I had convinced myself I preferred it that way. That was a lie. I watered the rosemary, changed the sheets, reorganized a drawer that did not need reorganizing. I even polished the dining table. But every time I heard a car slow near the house, I looked toward the window. At 5:15, Michael finally came. I saw him through the front glass before he knocked. He looked angry, not tired, not uncertain. Angry. I opened the door. Hi, we need to talk. No hello, no kiss on the cheek, no attempt at normal. I stepped aside. He walked directly into the living room. I closed the door behind him. Would you like coffee? No. Apparently nobody wanted coffee in my house anymore. Michael turned toward me. Vanessa had another meeting with the foundation. I know. His face tightened. How she told me they were reviewing the campaign. They're requesting documentation now. That seems reasonable. He laughed sharply. Reasonable, yes. They want sources for the stories, draft records, original materials, permissions. Again, reasonable. He stared at me. You really don't care what happens to her, do you? That sentence landed so quickly I almost missed how cruel it was. I folded my arms. That is not true. It sure feels true. I refuse to lie. That is not the same as wanting her ruined. You know what this position meant to her. I do. You know how hard she worked. Yes. And you still couldn't sign one statement. No. His voice rose. Because you wanted them to know she did something wrong. I stared at him. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself perfectly. No. You hear your fear. He shook his head. You've been waiting for this. For what? For Vanessa to be knocked down. I felt something inside me go cold. That is an ugly thing to say. Is it? Yes. You never liked the way she lived. That is not true. You judged her clothes. I did not. Her career, no. Her friends, no. You always made little comments about how expensive everything was. I almost laughed. Michael noticing a $3,000 refrigerator is not the same as condemning your wife for owning it. You always acted like you were better because you didn't care about status. I never said I was better. You didn't have to. His voice broke slightly. You made us feel shallow. I looked at my son. Not the angry man standing in my living room. The child beneath him. The boy who wanted approval and had somehow decided that my refusal to chase status was a criticism of his success. I spoke more gently. Michael, I was proud when you bought your first house. He looked away. I was proud when you got promoted. He said nothing. I was proud when you and Vanessa could afford things your father and I could not. His jaw tightened. That isn't what this is about. Then what is it about? He turned back. It's about you enjoying this. That did it. Something I had been holding in for years finally broke. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. I walked toward him. You think I enjoy watching your marriage struggle. I think you enjoy being proven right about her. I think you have spent so long protecting your wife from discomfort that you have forgotten your mother has feelings. His face hardened. Here we go. No, you are going to listen, Mom. For once you are going to listen. My voice was louder now, not screaming, but strong enough that he stopped. I pointed toward the dining room. Do you know what happened at that table when you were 6 years old? He frowned. What the oak table you keep telling me I should replace. I never said Vanessa did. You laughed. He looked irritated. What does the table have to do with anything, everything? I walked into the dining room. He followed reluctantly. I placed one hand on the old wood. There were nights your father sat right there with a calculator because he didn't know whether we could make the mortgage 2 months later. Michael went still. You told me business was slow. Business wasn't slow. It was dying. He stared at me. I continued. One contractor owed your father thousands of dollars and went bankrupt. 2 others delayed payment. We had savings but not enough. His anger weakened slightly. Why didn't you tell me you were 6? I mean later. Because things got better. That's not an answer. It was the answer I chose. He looked away. I touched the table again. I worked late at night right here. He glanced down. I remember you sewing. You remember the machine. You don't remember why. I could hear my own heartbeat now. After you went to bed, women brought me pants, coats, dresses. Sometimes I worked until 1 in the morning. His face changed. I thought you liked working at home. I did. That doesn't mean I wasn't doing it because we needed money. He swallowed. I continued before I lost courage. Do you remember your blue coat in 1st grade? He frowned. You mentioned that before. You loved it. I barely remember it. It came from a rummage sale. His eyes lowered. I know. No, you know now. I took a breath. You had jeans from thrift stores too. He looked at me. Baseball shirts I repaired. Silence. Shoes I bought 1 size larger because I needed them to last. He shook his head slowly. I never knew that. That was the point. Why? Because I wanted you to feel like every other child. I wouldn't have cared. You say that now. His face tightened. So you hid all of it? Yes. I looked directly into his eyes. And I made sure nothing you wore looked like something another family had discarded. His mouth opened, then closed. I continued. I patched knees from the inside so nobody could see. My voice trembled. I replaced buttons before you noticed they were missing. I felt tears pressing behind my eyes. I washed coats twice because I didn't want them to smell like somebody else's house. Michael looked away. I did not let him escape. The same thrift stores you find embarrassing now helped me keep you warm. I don't find them embarrassing. You asked me to change my coat. That was because of Vanessa. That makes it worse. He flinched. I stepped closer. You had no problem with that coat until you learned where I bought it. He said nothing. You liked it. Silence. You said it was nice, I remember. Then I told you it cost $24, and suddenly you were afraid your wife would be embarrassed. His eyes closed. I kept going. Do you know what that felt like? He whispered. No. It felt like the child I protected from shame grew into a man who brought that shame back into my house. His face changed completely. The anger disappeared. I had never intended to say that sentence, but once it was spoken, I knew it was true. Michael sank into one of the dining chairs. I remained standing. For a long time he stared at the wood grain. Then he said quietly, I didn't know. I know. Why didn't Dad tell me? Because your father agreed with me. Michael rubbed both hands over his face. I continued softer now. When things were bad, Frank and I had one rule. He looked up. You were not going to carry adult fear. I sat across from him. So we made things normal. My voice shook. Baseball stayed normal. Birthdays stayed normal. Christmas stayed normal. Your school clothes looked normal. We made sure you never heard us whispering about bills. Michael's eyes filled. You skipped things for me. Yes. What things? That isn't the point. What things? I looked at him. Meals sometimes. He stared at me. Mom. Not often. Meals if there was enough for dinner, but I had already eaten something small at work. I said I wasn't hungry. His face twisted. Jesus. Don't make it more dramatic than it was. You skipped food. We survived. That's not the same. No. I nodded. It isn't. He looked down again. For the first time I wondered whether I had protected him too well. Maybe children needed. No, not every meal appeared without sacrifice. Maybe adulthood should include discovering the real cost of the comfort you remembered as ordinary. Michael whispered, and second stitch. What about it? That was during all of this. Yes. He looked confused. You were worried about money, working at night and still doing that. Why? The question stunned me. Not because it was foolish, because I had never needed to explain the answer before, because other women had it worse. He looked at me, and because helping them reminded me I wasn't powerless either. I leaned back. Second stitch wasn't charity in the way Vanessa seems to understand that word. What do you mean? We didn't stand above people and hand things down. I shook my head. We sat beside them. Michael was quiet. The women taught each other. Frank repaired machines. People brought food. One woman who needed help 1 month might be the one teaching someone else 6 months later. He stared at the table. That's why the campaign language sounded like yours. Yes. And Vanessa used the papers. Yes. His face tightened with shame. I gave them to her. By mistake. But I still did. You didn't know what was in the box. I should have. I did not answer. He looked toward the old cabinet where family photographs sat. Why didn't I know who you were? The question hurt more than his anger had. You knew who I was. No. He shook his head. I knew Mom. I almost smiled. That's usually enough for a child. But I'm not a child. No. He looked at me. And I still never asked. There was nothing to say to that, so I let the silence stay. After several minutes, Michael stood. I want to see the papers. Vanessa has them. I know. Why? I want to read everything. I studied him. For what purpose? He swallowed. To understand what she used. Then more quietly, and what I never bothered to understand. I nodded. That would be a start. He picked up his jacket. At the door he stopped. Mom. Yes. His eyes were red. I'm sorry I told you not to embarrass Vanessa. I looked at him. It was the apology I had wanted, but it was not enough yet. He seemed to understand that. I'm sorry I didn't defend you at the table. I said nothing. And I'm sorry I made her career more important than what she did to you. My throat tightened. Thank you. He nodded. Not relieved. Just accepting. Then he left. The next morning, Michael did something I would not learn about until later. He went through every box Vanessa had taken from my attic. He read the newsletters, the volunteer notes, the old training outlines, the letters. He found photographs of his father repairing sewing machines after 10-hour construction days. He found an old church bulletin listing me as unpaid coordinator. He found the handwritten speech that included the words Vanessa had polished into her campaign, and near the bottom of one box he found a photograph. A little boy sat in the corner of St. Matthew's basement, wearing a second-hand blue coat sorting baseball cards while 12 women worked behind him. Michael stared at that photograph for a long time, because for the first time he could see what I had protected him from. He had remembered that basement as a place his mother sometimes sewed. Now he saw the women, the machines, his tired father in the background, and a version of his mother he had never thought to meet. The woman he had asked, not to embarrass his wife, had spent half her life making sure he never had to feel embarrassed by what his family could not afford. That was what my son finally heard. Not from a foundation board, not from Eleanor, from me. And once he heard it, he could no longer pretend the problem was only a $24 coat. The interview, Vanessa didn't expect. The foundation called me on Friday morning. Not Eleanor, not Michael. A woman named Patricia Green, who introduced herself as vice chair of the Richmond Women's Renewal Foundation. Her voice was calm, professional, and careful. Mrs. Price, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. No. I'm calling because the board is completing a review of materials connected to our Second Chances initiative. I looked out the kitchen window. Rain had started falling against the glass. I assumed that might happen. We would appreciate speaking with you in person. I was quiet. She continued quickly. You are not being accused of anything, and this is not a legal proceeding. We simply need factual clarification about the origin of several documents and stories. When Monday morning, if you're available. I almost said no. I did not want to become part of a committee investigation into my daughter-in-law. I did not want strangers examining the most difficult years of my marriage as evidence. Most of all, I did not want Michael thinking I had volunteered to help ruin Vanessa's career. Then I remembered the statement she had asked me to sign. I remembered Eleanor saying honesty was not revenge. I'll come. Monday, I drove downtown wearing navy slacks, a white blouse, and the same brown handbag Vanessa had once treated like an archaeological artifact. The camel coat stayed home, not because I was ashamed of it, because I refused to let that coat become a costume. This was no longer about proving anything. The foundation offices occupied 2 floors of a restored brick building near the river. A receptionist led me into a conference room. Patricia was already there. So was Eleanor. 2 other board members sat at the table. And Vanessa. Michael was not present. That surprised me. Vanessa sat straight-backed near the far end of the room wearing a charcoal suit. She looked composed from a distance. Up close, her fingers were twisted together beneath the table. She looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us smiled. Patricia gestured toward a chair. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Price. Sadie is fine. I sat down. A folder lay in front of each board member. Patricia began. I want to make something clear. Our concern here is not to publicly embarrass anyone. We are determining whether campaign materials met our ethical standards and whether there were failures in our internal review process. Vanessa looked down. That mattered to me. The foundation was not pretending the entire responsibility belonged to her. Patricia continued. We should have verified source permissions more carefully. Eleanor nodded. I appreciated that too. Then the questions began. Simple ones first. Did you create or help create a community program called Second Stitch Yes when roughly 29 years ago? Was it affiliated with St. Matthew's Community Center? Yes. Did you write volunteer training notes and community presentations? Yes. Patricia slid a photocopy toward me. Do you recognize this, my handwriting? Yellow paper. The sentence underlined twice. Never confuse needing help with having nothing to offer. Yes. Did you write it? Yes. She placed another sheet beside it. A page from Vanessa's campaign. Need is not emptiness. Every woman entering our program carries abilities she may not yet recognize as valuable. Patricia looked at me. Did you authorize this adaptation? Number Vanessa shifted. Patricia asked, did you authorize Mrs. Vanessa Price to use your second stitch materials? Generally, no. Did you know she had them? Not until recently. Did you voluntarily give them to your son? No. Michael took the box by mistake while helping me clear the attic. Vanessa finally spoke. He thought it belonged with the other family records. Patricia raised one hand gently. You'll have time to respond. Vanessa fell silent. The next question was harder. Patricia placed the anonymous profile in front of me. When pride becomes a prison, do you believe this profile draws from your personal life? Yes. What elements? My work as a seamstress. My husband's construction business struggling. Buying second-hand clothing. Protecting our son from financial stress. Were those facts publicly known? Not in that detail. Did Vanessa interview you? No. Did you consent to your experience being used? No. Is the profile accurate? I looked down at it. Factually, parts of it are. And emotionally, no. Patricia waited. I knew I needed to explain. It makes the woman's shame the center of the story. I tapped the paper. I was never ashamed that we bought used clothes. Vanessa's eyes lifted. I continued. I was frightened that we might lose financial stability. That is different. One board member asked, why does that distinction matter? Because shame is the whole lesson in this version. I looked around the table. It says the woman needed an organization to teach her she still had dignity. I paused. That was not what happened to me. What happened? Hardship taught me that dignity survives circumstances. Eleanor's eyes softened. I continued. And then I spent years trying to teach that to other women. Silence. Patricia nodded and closed the folder. Thank you. I thought that was the end. It was not. She turned to Vanessa. Mrs. Price, we'd like you to respond. Vanessa straightened. What happened next was almost painful to watch. She became the woman from the luncheon again. Polished, measured, professional. I recognized that I should have documented the source material more carefully. Patricia waited. I believed the materials had been transferred to our household as family records. Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. Vanessa continued. I used themes and stories as inspiration. I did not knowingly publish any confidential identifying information. One board member asked, did you know Sadie created the documents? Yes. Did you ask her permission? No. Why? Vanessa hesitated. I believed Michael had authority to share family materials. Did you believe Michael had authority to grant permission for his mother's personal writing? The question landed hard. Vanessa's face tightened. In retrospect, no. Patricia asked. And the anonymous profile? It was a composite. Did it draw substantially from Sadie's life? Yes. Did you ask whether she was comfortable with that? No. Vanessa's voice became smaller. I should have. For the first time I saw honesty rather than strategy. Then Eleanor spoke. She had been quiet through most of the meeting. Vanessa, may I ask you something that isn't in the documentation? Vanessa looked at her. Yes. Eleanor folded her hands. What did you learn from Sadie's work? Vanessa blinked. I'm sorry you read the newsletters. Yes. The speeches. Yes. The testimonials. Yes. You built a campaign around them. Yes. So what did you learn? Vanessa seemed almost relieved. This was a question she knew how to answer. She lifted her chin. I learned that women experiencing economic hardship deserve empowerment rather than judgment. That sustainable change requires skills, access, dignity, and Eleanor interrupted. No. Vanessa stopped. No one moved. Eleanor's tone was not harsh. That somehow made it more devastating. I did not ask for the campaign language. Vanessa stared at her. I asked what you learned. The room became painfully quiet. Vanessa looked at Patricia, then at me, then down at her hands. I just told you. Eleanor shook her head. You told me what the campaign says. Vanessa swallowed. Eleanor continued. You mocked a thrift store coat while sitting at a luncheon dedicated to women who may depend on thrift stores. Vanessa's face reddened. You described people receiving foundation services as though dressing like them were humiliating. I apologized for that, yes. But I want to understand something. Eleanor leaned forward. How did you spend months reading Sadie's words and still arrive at that table believing her second-hand coat made her less appropriate for the room? Vanessa's eyes filled immediately. She looked at me. I felt no pleasure. None. What I saw was a woman with nowhere left to hide behind polished language. I was nervous, she whispered. Eleanor waited. Vanessa wiped beneath one eye. I wanted everything to be perfect. That does not answer the question. Another tear escaped. Vanessa looked angry at herself for crying. Finally, she said, "Because I was embarrassed." The words barely came out. By Sadie, Patricia asked. Vanessa nodded. My stomach tightened. Hearing it directly hurt more than I expected. Vanessa looked at me. I thought people would judge me through you. I said nothing. She continued. Your car, your clothes, your house. Each word sounded uglier spoken plainly. I knew you could afford more and I couldn't understand why you wouldn't show it. Her voice cracked. I thought choosing inexpensive things when you didn't have to made you look. She stopped. I asked quietly. Poor. She closed her eyes. Yes. The room was silent. Vanessa opened them again. And I was ashamed that bothered me. Now I listened differently. She was not asking for sympathy. Not yet. I joined the foundation because it was good for my career at first. Patricia's expression changed slightly. Vanessa continued before anyone interrupted. Then I started believing in the work. She looked around the table. But I think I believed in it from a safe distance. Eleanor said nothing. Vanessa took a shaky breath. I liked helping women I could label as clients. Her eyes moved towards me. I didn't like being associated with anything that made me feel ordinary. That word struck me. Ordinary. I thought of my old dining table, my repaired handbag, my church thrift store, all the things she had been trying to escape. I wanted people to think I understood hardship, Vanessa said, and at the same time I wanted them to think I had never been close to it. There it was, the contradiction, finally spoken by the person living it. Eleanor asked, and Sadie's materials? Vanessa looked down. They made the campaign better. Did you know that when you used them? Yes. Did you know they weren't yours? A long silence. Then yes. I closed my eyes for 1 second. That hurt. But it was also the first complete truth I had heard from her. Patricia called for a brief recess. I went into the hallway. Vanessa remained inside. Eleanor joined me several minutes later. You okay? I think so. You don't look happy. Should I know? I leaned against the wall. I thought I would feel vindicated, and I just feel sad. Eleanor nodded. That's usually what happens when justice involves someone you love. That was exactly it. I did not love Vanessa the way I loved Michael. But she was family. I had known her 15 years. I had watched her marry my son. I had seen her at Christmas, birthdays, funerals, ordinary Sunday dinners. There was no victory in watching her confront the worst part of herself. The meeting resumed 40 minutes later. Patricia read the board's decision. Vanessa would not be appointed Director of Community Engagement. The campaign would undergo a formal source and permission review. Materials derived from private documents would be withdrawn or rewritten. Vanessa would not be publicly accused of misconduct unless further findings required disclosure. She was not losing her corporate job. The foundation was not banning her. Instead, if she wished to remain involved, she could continue only in a non-leadership volunteer role for the next year. She would also need to complete ethics and participant privacy training. No media work, no campaign leadership, no donor-facing role, direct community service. Vanessa sat very still. Patricia asked, "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Do you accept that?" Vanessa swallowed. "Yes." I looked at Eleanor. Her expression said what I was thinking. The consequence fit the mistake. Vanessa had wanted status for speaking about disadvantaged women. Now if she wanted to remain, she would have to work beside them without applause. When the meeting ended, everyone left slowly. I reached the hallway first. Then Vanessa called after me. "Sadie." I turned. She stood several feet away. Her face was pale. "I'm sorry." I believed she meant it. But something inside me knew that one truthful meeting could not undo months of contempt. So I said the only thing I could say honestly. "I hope you are." She nodded. No argument. No explanation. Then she walked away. Outside, the rain had stopped. I stood beside my car for several minutes before getting in. Michael called while I was still in the parking lot. I answered. "What happened?" he asked. I told him. All of it. When I finished, he was silent. Then he asked, "Are you happy?" "No." He seemed surprised. "I thought you wanted the truth to matter." I did. It did. Yes. I looked at the foundation building. That doesn't mean I wanted it to hurt. Michael was quiet again. Then he whispered, "I think I understand." For the first time, I believed he might. Vanessa had lost the position. But she had not lost her livelihood. She had not lost her marriage. She had not been publicly humiliated. She had been given something far less comfortable than punishment. A chance to prove whether the values she had borrowed could ever become values she actually lived. And none of us knew yet whether she would take it. The apology. I didn't accept right away. Michael came back to my house 3 weeks after the foundation meeting carrying a cardboard storage box. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring food. For once, he did not bring anything designed to make the conversation easier. He carried the box with both hands and set it carefully on my dining table. "What is this?" I asked. "Yours." I looked at the lid. In black marker, someone had written, "Second stitch." My chest tightened. "You went through everything." "Yes, all of it, all of it." Michael stood on the other side of the table looking more nervous than I had seen him in years. The box was different from the one Vanessa had taken from my attic. Cleaner, stronger, organized. Michael lifted the lid. Inside were folders. Labeled folders. Newsletters. Volunteer notes. Participant letters. Church records. Photographs. Training materials. I looked at him. "You organized them?" He nodded. "I bought archival sleeves for the photographs too." That was such an unexpectedly careful thing that I almost smiled. Almost. Why, he pulled out a chair. "Because I needed to read them." "You already told me that." "No." He shook his head. "I mean really read them." I sat across from him. Michael rested both hands on the table. For the first few days I was still looking for evidence. Evidence of how much Vanessa used. I said nothing. That was still where my head was. I wanted to know exactly what she had taken so I could understand how bad the foundation thought it was. He swallowed. Then I stopped reading like that. What changed? He looked toward the box. I found Dad's notes. I knew which ones. Frank wrote on anything. Receipts. Scraps of lumber estimates. Church bulletins. Napkins if necessary. Michael pulled out a yellow legal pad. Did he really keep repair records for every donated sewing machine? I laughed softly. He tried. There are notes like, "Machine number 7 hates everybody." That sounds like Frank. And, "Do not let Teresa touch tension knob." I covered my mouth. I remember that machine. Michael smiled briefly. Then the smile disappeared. I spent almost an hour reading Dad's handwriting. His eyes lowered. It was strange. What was I could hear him? That hit me hard. I knew exactly what he meant. Michael turned a page carefully. There were receipts too. Yes, for parts. Yes. He paid for some of them himself, sometimes. We didn't have much money then. No. So why was he buying belts and needles and replacement motors for strangers? I looked at my son. They stopped being strangers. Michael nodded. I know that now. He reached into the box and removed a photograph. I recognized it immediately. The St. Matthew's basement. 12 women. Frank in the back. Me near the center. And Michael, 6 years old, sitting in the corner with baseball cards spread around him. He placed the photograph between us. That's the coat. I smiled. The blue one. He touched the edge of the picture. You fixed that? Yes. I remember loving that coat. You did. He laughed quietly. I remember thinking it made me look like one of the older boys. You wore it until your wrists stuck out 2 inches. His smile faded. Then he said, I'm ashamed. I felt my body stiffen slightly. Of the coat, no. He looked directly at me. Of myself. I did not answer. Michael folded his hands. I've been thinking about what I said before the luncheon. Which part? Please don't embarrass Vanessa. I looked down. He continued. I keep hearing it. So do I. His face tightened. I know. There was no defense in him this time. That mattered. I liked your coat until I knew the price. Yes. I told myself I was worried about Vanessa being nervous. You were. I was also embarrassed. The word sat between us. At least he was finally willing to use it. I thought people at that luncheon might look at you and make assumptions about us. Us, Vanessa and me. I nodded slowly. So your wife was right. About one thing. What that I had started caring too much about how other people saw me. I leaned back. Michael looked around the dining room. At some point, I began thinking success meant never looking like you had struggled. I said nothing. New house, better car, right clothes, right restaurants. He rubbed his palms together. I don't even know exactly when it happened. It usually happens slowly. He looked at me. You knew I knew you were changing. Why didn't you say something? I did, when every time I defended my old car. A faint smile appeared. Every time I refused to replace this table. I touched the wood. Every time I told you I didn't need something just because I could afford it. He looked down. I thought you were being stubborn. I was. That surprised a laugh out of him. Stubborn and correct can coexist. That sounds like something Dad would say. It probably is. For a moment we both smiled. Then Michael's eyes grew serious again. I'm sorry, Mom. I waited. Not because I wanted him to suffer, because I wanted to hear what he understood. He continued. I'm sorry I laughed when Vanessa made comments about your things. I nodded. I'm sorry I treated her discomfort like your responsibility. Another pause. I'm sorry I gave her those papers without checking. That was a mistake. I know. And... He swallowed. And I'm sorry that after I realized she used them, I still worried more about her career than what it did to you. That was the one. The apology reached the place the others had not. I looked away because my eyes had started burning. Michael's voice softened. I should have defended you at the luncheon before Eleanor said a single word. I looked back at him. Yes. He nodded. I know. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he said, Can you forgive me? There was a time when I would have answered immediately. Of course. You're my son. Come here. Let's forget it. That was what mothers were trained to do sometimes without realizing it. Absorb, smooth, repair, make dinner afterward. But I had spent the past month learning that fixing something too quickly could prevent people from understanding what had broken. So I answered carefully. I love you. His face fell slightly. That isn't what I asked. I know. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. And yes, I believe I can forgive you. He exhaled. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. His eyes met mine. I continued. I need to trust that the next time someone disrespects me, you won't wait to see whether an important person agrees before you decide it matters. He winced. That's fair. I need to trust that when I say something hurts me, your first response won't be to explain why I misunderstood it. He nodded. And I need you to stop treating keeping the peace as more important than telling the truth. I will. I raised one eyebrow. Don't promise quickly. He almost smiled. Okay. Show me. His expression became serious again. I will. That was better. After Michael left, I spent the afternoon going through the box. He had done a beautiful job. Every letter was protected. Every photograph labeled when he could identify the date. I had even created a list of materials Vanessa had used, so I would know what needed to be returned to the women involved or handled more carefully. At the bottom was a small envelope. Inside, Michael had placed a note. Mom, I spent 41 years thinking I knew your whole story because I was in it. I was wrong. Thank you for making my childhood feel safe. I'm sorry I confused that safety with proof that nothing had cost you anything. Love, Michael. I sat at the table and cried. Not dramatically, just quietly. The kind of tears that come when pain finally has somewhere to go. Vanessa came to see me 9 days later. This time she called first. That mattered too. When I opened the door, she stood there wearing jeans, flat shoes, and a simple gray sweater. No designer handbag, no foundation pin, nothing polished. But I noticed something else. She was not trying to look humble. That would have been another performance. She simply looked tired. "Can I come in?" "Yes." She carried a smaller box. I found a few more original documents in my office. She placed them on the table. I wanted to return them myself. "Thank you." She remained standing. "Can we talk?" I nodded toward the chair. She sat. For a moment, Vanessa looked at her hands. Then she said, "I've started the ethics training. How is it uncomfortable? That may mean it's working." She gave a small smile. "I thought you might say that." I waited. She continued, "I also started volunteering at the Workforce Center, doing what mostly intake support, sorting donated clothing, setting up rooms. I could not help myself. Thrift-Store clothes." She looked at me, then surprisingly laughed. "Yes. Dangerous environment. I deserve that." "No." I shook my head. "You deserve honesty, not endless punishment." Her smile faded. "I've been thinking about what Eleanor asked me. What did you learn?" "Yes." She took a breath. I didn't know how to answer because I had learned the language without learning the lesson. That was more self-awareness than I had expected. I think I treated compassion like branding. I said nothing. It made me feel like a good person. She looked toward the window. But the women were always over there, over where on the other side of something. She struggled for the words. I could help them because they weren't connected to my identity. I understood. "And me, you were too close." Her eyes filled. "You made me afraid people might think I came from somewhere ordinary." I looked around my living room. The old curtains, the worn table, the furniture Frank and I had repaired. "Ordinary isn't a disease, Vanessa." "I know." She stopped, then corrected herself. "I'm trying to know." That was better. She looked at me. "I am sorry for what I said at the luncheon." I waited. "I'm sorry I mocked your coat." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry I made you feel like I was ashamed to be connected to you. That wasn't only a feeling." She nodded. "No, I was ashamed. The honesty hurt, but it also cleaned something between us." She continued. "I'm sorry I used your work without asking. And the stories. And the stories." She swallowed. "I'm especially sorry I turned your life into something it wasn't because the version I created fit my campaign better." I studied her face. No excuses. No request to sign anything. No explanation about pressure. She simply sat there and let the apology remain difficult. Finally, she said, "I don't expect you to forgive me." "That's good." She blinked. I almost smiled. "Because if you came here expecting forgiveness, we'd already have another problem." A tiny laugh escaped her. Then she wiped one tear away. "I don't know how to fix this." There it was. The question I understood better than most. I leaned back. "You don't fix trust with one conversation." She nodded. "You repair it." "What's the difference?" "Repair takes repetition." She looked at me. "You do the right thing again and again until the damaged part can carry weight." Vanessa's eyes dropped to the table. "Like a seam." "Exactly." She was silent. Then I said, "An apology begins the repair." She looked up. "It isn't the repair." She nodded. "I understand. I hope you will." When she stood to leave, neither of us hugged. That felt important. Not cruel. Honest. At the door she turned. "I'm volunteering again Thursday." "Good. They asked me to help organize interview clothing." I smiled. "Check the seams." She laughed softly. "I will." Then she left. I watched her walk to her car. I did not know whether Vanessa had truly changed. People rarely transformed because of one humiliating month. Change was quieter than that. Slower. It happened through choices no audience applauded. But for the first time, she had come to my house without asking me to save her from what she had done. Michael had apologized without demanding immediate absolution. And I had done something new too. I had allowed the people I loved to feel the full weight of repairing what they had damaged. For most of my life, I had believed love meant fixing every torn seam as quickly as possible. Now I understood something else. Sometimes love meant handing someone the needle and letting them learn how to stitch. The second stitch. 4 months after the foundation meeting, Eleanor called me on a Tuesday morning while I was trimming dead leaves from the basil plant on my kitchen windowsill. "Are you busy Thursday?" At 68, I've learned to be suspicious when people ask that. She laughed. "Good. Stay suspicious. But say yes anyway. To what I want to show you something." "What kind of something?" "The kind you'll complain about if I explain it over the phone." "That sounds promising. 10 o'clock. I'll send you the address." Before I could argue, she hung up. Eleanor had not changed much in 29 years. She had simply become more efficient. Thursday morning, I drove to a renovated brick building on the south side of Richmond. The sign outside read, "Richmond Workforce Resource Center." I recognized the name immediately. It was one of the programs supported by the foundation. Inside the building was brighter than St. Matthew's basement had ever been. There were classrooms, computers, a childcare room, interview booths, a small kitchen, and near the back, a large multi-purpose workspace with 6 sewing machines lined up beneath the windows. I stopped in the doorway. Eleanor stood beside me. Well, I stared at the machines. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet." "Eleanor." She smiled. "The foundation is expanding practical skills programming." I walked inside slowly. Shelves held fabric thread, donated clothing scissors, measuring tapes and repair supplies. One corner had clothing racks organized by size. Another had 2 tables with laptops. "What is this supposed to become?" "That depends. On what you..." I turned toward her. "No." She laughed. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." "Yes, I do. You've always been annoyingly confident." "I'm retired. So retired means I successfully escaped people asking me to organize things." "I am not asking you to organize anything." "That sounds worse." Eleanor pointed toward the sewing machines. "We want to build a small skills program around clothing repair and workplace preparation." I looked at her. "Practical sewing?" "Yes." "Alterations?" "Yes." "Interview clothes?" "Yes." "Basic budgeting too?" "We're discussing it." "Resume help?" "Already available down the hall." I looked around the room again. Something tightened in my chest. It was too familiar. Not in appearance, in purpose. Eleanor's voice softened. "I think we should call it the Sadie Price Workforce Studio." I turned immediately. "No." Her smile disappeared. "No, absolutely not." "Why? Because that sounds like I died and somebody donated a building." She laughed. "I'm serious. So am I." She folded her arms. "You deserve recognition." "I have recognition." From whom? I looked at her. "You remembered me after 29 years." That silenced her. I continued. Michael read the old papers. Vanessa finally understood what they meant. Women built lives after leaving that basement. I gestured toward the machines. "I don't need my name on a wall." Eleanor studied me. "What would you call it?" I knew immediately. "Second stitch." Her expression softened. "You're sure?" "Yes." I ran my fingers across the edge of the nearest sewing table. "Because the name was never mine. It belonged to Teresa's crooked seam, Frank's repaired machines, Marlene's first paycheck, Eleanor's backward zipper. All of us." "Second stitch," Eleanor repeated. I nodded. "That I can live with." She smiled. "Then I have another question." I knew there was more. "Would you teach now?" She laughed. "Sadie." I said I'm retired. 2 mornings a month." I stared at her. Two. No committees, no committees. No donor lunches. I can't promise nobody will ever offer you lunch. No speeches. Fine. No giant picture of me hanging near the door. That was not part of the plan. It better not become part of it. Eleanor held out her hand. 2 mornings. I looked at it, then at the sewing machines, then back at her. 2. We shook. That was how I became a teacher again. Not chairwoman, not founder, not honorary anything. Teacher. It felt right. The revived second stitch officially began 6 weeks later. The first morning, 8 women came. One was 27, another 59. One had recently divorced. One had lost her retail job after 15 years. Another wanted to learn basic alterations because she hoped to earn money from home while caring for her mother. Different lives, same nervousness. I stood in front of them holding a spool of thread. I have one rule. 8 faces turned toward me. If you make a mistake, you are allowed to complain for 30 seconds. A few smiled. After that, you fix it. Someone laughed. I smiled too. And suddenly I was back at St. Matthew's. Not because the room looked the same, because hope sounded the same. Quiet at first, then louder once people realized nobody was going to laugh at them for not knowing something. Vanessa volunteered there too. At first she mostly worked behind the scenes, sorting donations, preparing folders, checking appointment schedules, hanging jackets. Nothing glamorous, nothing she could photograph and turn into a campaign. I noticed she rarely mentioned the foundation online anymore. That mattered. Our relationship was still cautious. We spoke politely, sometimes warmly. But I did not pretend everything had returned to normal. Normal had been part of the problem. Instead, we built something different. One Thursday afternoon, I was helping a woman repair the hem of an interview skirt when the front door opened. A woman in her mid-50s stepped inside holding a garment bag. Her name was Denise. She had been attending resume workshops for 2 weeks and had finally landed an interview with a medical billing company. She looked nervous. Vanessa approached her. "Big day tomorrow," Denise gave a shaky laugh. "If I don't faint first." "You won't." "I might." She unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a navy blazer. It was slightly dated but well made. Denise looked embarrassed. "I got it secondhand." I looked up from the sewing machine. So did Vanessa. Denise continued. "It was all I could afford." For 1 second the room seemed to go completely still, at least to me. Vanessa looked at the blazer, then at Denise. I watched her carefully. Not because I wanted her to fail, because some moments tell you whether a person has truly learned anything. Vanessa reached for the hanger. "May I?" Denise handed it over. Vanessa examined the jacket. "It's beautiful." Denise gave her a doubtful look. "It's old. So, the sleeves are too long." Vanessa smiled. "Then let's make sure it fits you like it was made for you." I lowered my eyes before anyone noticed the tears forming there. It was such a simple sentence. No speech, no apology, no audience. Vanessa did not even know I had heard it. That was why it mattered. Later after, Denise left with the blazer pinned for alterations. Vanessa approached me. "You heard that, didn't you? I hear everything." She smiled. "That is terrifying." "It should be." She glanced toward the door Denise had exited through. I almost said something stupid. What, that she should buy something newer? I waited. Vanessa shook her head. "Then I remembered your coat." I smiled. "That coat has caused enough trouble for one lifetime." "No." Her expression became serious. "I think it caused exactly the right amount." I looked at her. Months earlier that statement might have irritated me. Now I understood what she meant. The coat had not created the problem. It had revealed it. That afternoon, Michael arrived to pick me up for lunch. We had started meeting every other week. Sometimes he came to my house. Sometimes I met him near his office. We were not trying to return to what we had been. We were getting to know each other again. That was better. When he walked into Second Stitch, he stopped beside the machines. "You look at home." "I am." He smiled. "Dad would love this." My throat tightened. Yes. He'd probably complain these machines are too new. He absolutely would. Michael pointed toward one. "No personality." "Exactly." We laughed. On the way out, I pulled my camel-colored coat from the rack. The same coat. $24. Same repaired lining. Same replacement buttons. Michael held it open for me. I slipped my arms into the sleeves. He adjusted the collar slightly. "That coat looks good on you, Mom." I glanced at him. There was no embarrassment in his face. No concern about who might hear where it came from. Just my son. "It always did," I said. He smiled. "Yes, it did." We walked outside together. The Richmond afternoon was cool and bright. Behind us, through the windows of Second Stitch, I could see Vanessa helping another volunteer organize donated clothing. Eleanor stood near the front desk speaking with someone. A sewing machine began humming. For one moment I thought about everything that coat had carried. A thrift store tag, Vanessa's laughter, Michael's silence, Eleanor's recognition, my anger, my boundaries, their apologies, and finally something gentler, understanding. The strange thing was, the coat itself had never changed after I repaired it. It had been valuable before the luncheon, valuable while Vanessa mocked it, valuable before Eleanor recognized me, valuable after everyone in that room learned part of my history. The only thing that changed was what other people were finally able to see. And perhaps that was the lesson hidden inside all of it. Recognition does not create worth. A title does not create worth. Money does not create worth. Approval does not create worth. Sometimes the world sees something old, worn, inexpensive, or ordinary and assumes there is nothing left worth noticing. I had spent most of my life knowing better. A torn lining could be repaired. A crooked seam could be redone. A frightened woman could rebuild a career. A son could learn what his mother's silence had cost. A daughter-in-law could discover that compassion was something you practiced when nobody important was watching. And a program that disappeared from a church basement could receive a second stitch of its own. Michael opened the restaurant door for me. I stepped inside wearing my $24 coat. I did not wonder what anyone thought of it. I did not need to. Some things are valuable long before the right person recognizes them. And some people spend half a lifetime learning that they never needed permission to know their own worth. Sometimes the deepest wounds do not come from strangers. They come from the people we love most, the ones whose approval we thought we no longer needed, but whose words can still reach places inside us that no one else can touch. Sadie's story is a reminder that our value is never determined by the price of our clothes, the age of our home, the car we drive, or the opinions of people who confuse appearance with worth. A $24 coat can carry more dignity than an expensive suit if the person wearing it has lived with courage, kindness, and integrity. But this story is also about something harder: boundaries. Sadie loved her son. She cared about Vanessa. Yet love did not require her to lie for them, protect them from every consequence, or pretend their behavior had not hurt her. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is stop rescuing the people we care about from the lessons their own choices are trying to teach them. Forgiveness works the same way. Forgiving someone does not mean trust instantly returns. An apology may begin the repair, but real change is built through repeated actions, quiet choices made when no one is watching and no applause is coming. Vanessa's real transformation did not happen when she lost the prestigious position. It happened months later when a frightened woman apologized for wearing a second-hand blazer, and Vanessa finally saw the person before she saw the price tag. And perhaps that is the question worth carrying with us. How do we treat people when we believe they have nothing to offer us? That may reveal more about our character than any speech, title, donation, or public reputation ever could. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Sadie handled the situation the right way? Would you have forgiven Michael and Vanessa? Or would you have needed more time? And have you ever been judged because of what you wore, what you owned, or where you came from? Share your story below.